LoveLore Library. Chapter 124. Shinyu glanced at Shang Junlin and saw that his expression didn't change. He knew that Shang Junlin didn't think too deeply about this matter. Slowly retracting his gaze, Shinyu thought to himself, maybe he thought too much. It's just a flower. How could it be related to this kind of thing? Maybe he and Shang Junlin didn't do anything that night, and it would still blossom. Seeing that the two masters didn't have any other orders, Mushi left. When Shinyu and Shang Junlin were alone, they didn't like the palace servants to serve them. The servants of Yuzhang Palace also knew this. Unless the master called them, they wouldn't easily come forward. Shang Junlin stirred the medicine in the bowl and scooped up a spoonful. Just as he was about to feed Shinyu, his hand was held down by Shinyu. I'll do it myself. Shinyu half propped himself up and sat up. No matter how much he tried to improve the taste of the medicine, it wouldn't be very good. Shinyu didn't want to drink it spoonful by spoonful. You don't want me to feed you. The taste of the medicine is too hard to describe. I want to drink it directly. Looking at Shinyu's outstretched hand, Shang Junlin put down the spoon and handed the bowl to Shinyu as he wished. Shinyu drank the medicine in one gulp. Shang Junlin brought a handkerchief and candied fruit over. Shinyu leaned over and took the candied fruit from Shang Junlin's hand. His soft lips and skin touched and parted. She was like a noble cat. Shang Junlin's eyes darkened. He put one hand around Shinyu's waist and pulled him directly into his arms. He lowered his head and kissed Shinyu. I'll try it. Is it bitter? After the kiss, Shinyu pressed his forehead against Shang Junlin's and asked. It's sweet. Shang Junlin rubbed against Shinyu like a big dog. A yu is sweet everywhere. After drinking the medicine, Shinyu felt a little sleepy. Shang Junlin was very careful that night, so he didn't suffer any injuries. However, after being tormented for a whole night, it wasn't easy for him to recover his vitality. Otherwise, Imperial Physician Gu wouldn't have given him a new prescription and reminded His Majesty to control himself. Sleep for a while if you're tired. Do you want to go to bed? Shang Junlin touched his face. Shinyu shook his head. He didn't want to lie in bed all day long. It would remind him of some bad things from his previous life. Shang Junlin didn't force him. In his heart, he didn't want Shinyu to rest on the bed. Compared to other places, he wanted Shinyu to lie in a place where he could reach. Shinyu nestled in the man's arms, found a comfortable position, and slowly closed her eyes. He had a dream again. In the dream, it was a rainy day. He was lying on the bed. His body was heavy, as if something was pressing down on him. He couldn't even lift a hand. Separated by a screen, there were people walking around outside. At the same time, there were also low voices. Your Majesty, please rest assured. Shang Junlin knocked on the armrest of the chair. Then tell me, what's wrong with His Majesty today? From his pulse, His Majesty's body is indeed fine. It's inevitable for normal people to have nightmares. Your Majesty, you don't have to worry too much. What Imperial Physician Gu said was true. Anyone could have nightmares. It wasn't a big deal. Shang Junlin naturally knew this. However, this matter concerned Shinyu, so he couldn't ignore it. You can get up. Imperial Physician Gu stood up. He hesitated for a moment and said, Your Majesty, His Majesty's body is weak. Please restrain yourself when you do things. Imperial Physician Gu still remembered the first time he came to check on Shinyu. The young man only had one arm sticking out of the bed curtain. That arm was covered with red marks. Even the gaps between the fingers were covered. It was easy to imagine how serious the other parts of his body were. I know I shouldn't ask about this matter, but His Majesty. I really can't stand your torment. Imperial physician Gu felt the pressure around him getting lower and lower. He silently swallowed the rest of his words. I know, Shang Junlin's face was a little dark. Write a note for me. Yes, Your Majesty. Shen Yu slept comfortably. The next day, he felt much better. However, he still had some trouble walking. Shen Yu didn't want others to see him lose his self-control. He spent almost all day on the soft bed. Fortunately, Shang Junlin knew that he was in the wrong and would massage his sore parts. The disaster in Subei was alleviated. The people who spread the rumors were arrested. However, the person behind the scenes was very calm. Even if many of their strongholds were destroyed, they still didn't reveal anything. Shen Yu lay on Shang Junlin's lap. He played with the man's long hair. Last time, Your Majesty said that you would tell the king of you about the thief. Does he know now? I asked the jailer to accidentally let it slip in front of him. That night, the king of you made a scene in the secret prison. The jailer was so angry that he kindly had told the king of you everything related to the king of you's thief, the capital, and the king of you. In fact, if the king of you thought about it carefully, he would find that there were many things wrong with this matter. For example, why would the jailer tell him these things? For example, why would the jailer know these things so clearly? There were many suspicious points. Unfortunately, the king of you was so angry that he couldn't think of these things. In this life, the king of you had no chance to ascend the throne. Whether it was Shen Yu or Shang Junlin, they wouldn't allow him to ascend the throne. Shen Qingran was also trapped in the Marquis Fu. Because of Shen Yu's interference, in this life, the two had very little interaction, let alone develop feelings like in the previous life. Thinking of Shen Qingran, Shen Yu felt that it was very interesting. At the same time, in the previous life, Shen Qingran was trapped in the imperial palace and couldn't enter or leave. In this life, he didn't enter the imperial palace but was still trapped. It was just that the location changed from the imperial palace to the Marquis Fu. He didn't know what Shen Qingran was thinking. Shen Qingran was naturally unwilling. The better Shen Yu's life was, the more unwilling he was. However, he didn't know who ordered the servants in the Marquis Fu to talk about how Shen Guijun was favored outside his courtyard every few days. It was the same today. Shen Qingran was lying on the bed, tossing and turning. Suddenly, he heard the discussion outside the window. It wasn't loud, but it was just enough for him to hear clearly. It was as if they were talking deliberately to let him hear it. Did you see it today? His Majesty rewarded a lot of things. The Marquis was so happy today that he gave us a lot of rewards. Is it also because of Guijun this time? Otherwise, Guijun is the eldest legitimate son of the Marquis Fu. He can't be compared to any cat or dog. Some people relied on the Marquis's favor and jumped around more happily than anyone else. Look at them now, they were beaten back to their original state. A concubine's son is a concubine's son. He only has this little eyesight. Look at Guijun. That's the bearing that a legitimate son should have. Guijun is now favored by His Majesty. Finally, there's a silver lining. His Majesty really dotes on Guijun. I heard that Yuzhang Palace receives rewards every few days. They are all precious things. What His Majesty rewarded to the Marquis Fu is nothing compared to those. It's just a drizzle. Shen Qingran couldn't hear the rest of the words clearly. Jealousy was gnawing at his heart like a poisonous snake. The words of the servants were like needles stabbing at him. Those words circled around his mind, constantly reminding him that how glorious Shen Yu was, he was a failure. He thought that he could always suppress Shen Yu. However, he didn't know when their positions had been completely reversed. Shen Yu was already standing at a height that he could only look up to. He had the emperor's only favor and was favored by thousands of people. Everyone had to lower their heads in front of him. But what about him? Could he only shrink in this small courtyard and spend the rest of his life? The light in Shen Qingran's eyes dimmed. No, he would never allow himself to end up like this. Shen Yu, who was missed by Shen Qingran, was in a tug-of-war with Shang Junlin. Your Majesty, Shen Yu held the quilt and stared at Shang Junlin vigilantly. I really can't. Why didn't you agree? Is it because he doesn't like me? For some reason, Shen Yu felt that Shang Junlin's tone was a little sad. Before he could say anything, Shang Junlin leaned over and pulled him and the quilt together under his body. You obviously liked. Shen Yu raised his hand to cover his mouth. Then, he felt something soft rubbing against his palm. Shen Yu quickly withdrew his hand. Chapter 125. There was a wet feeling in his palm. Shen Yu's fingers curled up slightly in his sleeves. He realized that Shang Junlin liked his hand very much. When he did that, he especially liked to guide his hand to leave marks on his body. Previously, when he was worried about his body and didn't do it to the end, he also liked to let his hand hold him. Some memories uncontrollably emerged in his mind, and Shen Yu's face gradually turned red. Shang Junlin propped himself on top of Shen Yu and saw the changes on his face clearly. He laughed softly and said, "What is you thinking about?" Shen Yu pulled the quilt to cover half of his face and said, "Nothing." He could feel the heat on his face. His face must have turned completely red. It was rare to see Shen Yu like this, so Shang Junlin didn't want to miss it. He propped his elbow on the side of Shen Yu's face, lowered his body, and pulled down the quilt covering Shen Yu's face with one hand. His face was almost touching Shen Yu's face and he said, "Why are you blushing if you aren't thinking about anything? Is you shy?" "No." Shen Yu refused to admit it. Without the quilt covering his face, Shang Junlin could clearly see every change in Shen Yu. He saw that Shen Yu's eyes flashed when he said this, and he couldn't help but glance to the side. He knew that Shen Yu was being stubborn. The shy Yu was even more delicious. Shang Junlin opened his mouth and gently bit on Shen Yu's blushing face. Shen Yu suddenly opened his eyes and felt a wet feeling from the place where he was bitten. "Your Majesty, you, call my name." Shang Junlin whispered. "Alin." Shen Yu called out tentatively and found that the man was even more excited. He could feel it through the quilt. Shen Yu silently moved to the side. Shang Junlin was unwilling to let go of him so easily. He pulled him back together with the quilt. "Let me look at you." Shang Junlin's voice was low and hoarse, with a desire to control himself. Shen Yu had heard this man say, "Hug me tightly," in her ear countless times when she was at the peak. Not only his face, but Shen Yu also felt that his body was starting to heat up. Shang Junlin slowly peeled Shen Yu out of the quilt. The young man was only wearing a white nightgown. His long hair was gently draped over his back. His hair was black, and his skin was snow-white. The light pink color spread out on his snow-white skin. Under the soft candlelight, he looked even more beautiful. Shang Junlin's eyes became darker and darker. Now, Shen Yu was like a budding flower, waiting for the final rain to completely unfold. Shang Junlin had seen this flower in full bloom before. That was the result of his hard work. His watering made this flower bloom little by little, and also made this flower stained with his own imprint, from the inside out. The man's gaze was like a fire that could easily ignite everything. Shen Yu felt a little thirsty and unconsciously licked his lips. He saw with his own eyes that because of this action, Shang Junlin's gaze became dangerous. Shen Yu really wanted to continue covering himself with the quilt, but Shang Junlin would not give him the chance. The man lowered his head and kissed Shen Yu's watery lips. Sucking, grinding, dancing, there were still traces on Shen Yu's body, which were left by Shang Junlin last time. Soon, new traces covered the old ones one by one. On the white snow, the red plum blossoms slowly bloomed. The half-open flower was forced to unfold, and it was dyed with another kind of scent from the inside out. Shang Junlin was very gentle this time. After Shinyu fell into a deep sleep, he was not woken up by him. This time, Shinyu slept very deeply and was not disturbed by nightmares. It would have been better if he did not wake up with some kind of sore feeling in the morning. The sky was not yet bright, and the man's scent was still wrapped around him. This was a rare morning when Shinyu woke up and Shang Junlin had not yet woken up. The man who had not yet woken up hugged him and gently rubbed against him. Shinyu bit his lower lip to prevent himself from making a sound. Joy and suffering alternated, and every moment became extremely difficult to bear. Fortunately, Shang Junlin woke up soon. You. Get out. Shinyu gritted his teeth. He was so angry that he even forgot about Shang Junlin's identity. Shang Junlin was silent. Obviously, he did not expect to encounter such a big impact when he woke up. Shang Junlin hugged the young man in his arms and did the opposite of what Shinyu wanted. Bastard, when the two of them woke up, it was already 2 hours later. Shang Junlin carried Shinyu to wash his body, put on clean clothes for him, and carried him to the soft bed. The palace servants lowered their heads to clean up the room. Shinyu lay on the soft bed weakly with his eyes slightly closed. He did not even have the strength to scold people now. On the other hand, Shang Junlin was full of energy and could not hide the fatigue on his face. Shinyu simply closed his eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. Shang Junlin did not go to the morning court today. When it was almost time for the morning court, Eunuch Meng stood outside the door and listened to the muffled sounds coming from the room. He did not know whether to open his mouth or not. Of course, he knew what such sounds meant, but he did not expect to hear it at this time. Listening to the faint sounds coming from inside, he was afraid that it would not end in a short time. Eunuch Meng looked at the closed door of the bedchamber awkwardly. Seeing that there was not enough time, Eunuch Meng gritted his teeth and knocked on the door. "Your Majesty, it's almost time for the morning court." The sounds inside stopped for a moment, but only for a moment. Eunuch Meng wiped his face, knowing that this was the answer from His Majesty. Therefore, on this day, the ministers who came to the morning court on time waited for more than 2 hours before they waited for the late emperor. The ministers looked at Shang Junlin with a frosty face and looked at each other. What happened? He looked like a husband who was chased out of his room by his wife. They did not know that Shang Junlin was chased out by Shinyu, who was angered by him early in the morning. Otherwise, today's morning court would have been cancelled. Because Shang Junlin was in a bad mood, the ministers also waited for a long time. They did not dare to provoke him, so they finished the morning court very efficiently. The morning court ended at about the same time as usual. When they walked out of the main hall, the ministers breathed a sigh of relief. What happened today? Not only is His Majesty late for more than 2 hours, but he is also in such a bad mood. A few of the ministers who had a good relationship with him gathered together and whispered. I'm not sure. Hasn't His Majesty been in a good mood these days? Last time, I made a mistake and thought I would be punished by His Majesty. I didn't expect His Majesty to let it go so easily. The situation in Subei has been very stable, and nothing major happened in the imperial court. What happened to His Majesty today? It can't be that he made His Majesty unhappy, right? A minister joked. Why is it that he made His Majesty unhappy and not the other way around? Another minister was puzzled. Jiang Huiqing followed behind the Prime Minister. When he heard this, he was a little worried. He gently pulled He Qingyu's sleeve. He Qingyu moved closer to him and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong? Did His Majesty really have a conflict with His Majesty today?" Afraid that others would hear, Jiang Huiqing lowered his voice. Will His Majesty really be angry with His Majesty? He Qingyu was a little amused. Why are you worried about this? Don't worry, His Majesty won't be angry with His Majesty. Why? Jiang Huiqing was puzzled. He Qingyu's fingers moved slightly. He wanted to rub Jiang Huiqing's hair, but he had to give up on the idea because there were too many people around. Look at His Majesty and His Majesty's interactions outside the palace. Do you think His Majesty will be angry with His Majesty? His Majesty will be angry with anyone but His Majesty. Jiang Huiqing recalled the few times he had interacted with the two outside the palace. He had to admit that He Qingyu was right. The ministers all guessed that something big was about to happen, but they didn't know that they were getting farther and farther away from the truth. In a certain courtyard. Sir, did we just take over the imperial court and destroy our stronghold? That's... You think I don't know? The man called Sir was hidden in the darkness. You think I want to see this result? This subordinate knows his mistake. The speaker knelt down and admitted his mistake. What's the situation in Subei? The supplies sent by the imperial court were directly sent to various small places. They didn't pass through the main city of Subei. Moreover, they were escorted by the army from beginning to end. We didn't know where to start. What about the people who asked you to fan the flames in Subei? The man's voice was filled with unconcealable anger. Sir, the subordinate swallowed his saliva. Apart from a few places, the rest failed. Even those few places were quickly suppressed, useless. The man was so angry that he smashed the things on the desk. What did you do? Not only did they fail to accomplish anything, they even lost all of their manpower. Didn't you say that the imperial court was transferring supplies to the people? It was such a good opportunity to fan the people. Why couldn't you do such a small thing? Sir, we're innocent. This matter seems to be different from what we thought. Those people not only didn't complain about the imperial court, but also defended. The man was puzzled. Shouldn't the imperial court have angered the people by doing such a thing? Sir, we've been deceived. Those supplies weren't forcibly conscripted at all. They were voluntarily given by the people. The fear in the subordinate's heart grew stronger. Not only the ordinary people, but also the vassals, aristocratic families, merchants. They all donated voluntarily. When the subordinates figured out this matter, they realized how wrong they were. Their plan was doomed to fail from the very beginning. So that's how it is. The man smiled darkly. No wonder it didn't succeed even once. It turns out that they already knew that we would make a move. Sir, what should we do next? Don't worry about those people and strongholds. Do it cleanly. Don't let the imperial court find more important things. The matter in Subei is about to end. Shang Junlin, oh Shang Junlin, what's the use of sending so many things to Subei? In the end, aren't you just going to benefit me? Ha ha ha. The two people in the room didn't notice that the corner of a black robe flashed across the roof, almost blending into the night. The matter in Subei had reached a critical period. When Shang Junlin returned to Yuzhang Palace after discussing the follow-up matters with the Prime Minister and other important ministers in the imperial study, it was already dark. What is Guijun doing? The first thing Shang Junlin asked after entering the door was Xinyu. Is he uncomfortable today? Mu Shik shook her head. Guijun slept a little more during the day. He's now in the small study. Shang Junlin turned around and walked towards the small study. Xinyu was writing something. Under the candlelight, the young man's body was covered with a layer of halo. Shang Junlin raised his hand to signal the palace servants not to follow and walked in alone. Why isn't you resting on the soft couch? Shang Junlin habitually walked over and wanted to hug Xinyu. The young man quietly avoided him. Shin Yu was sitting on a chair with a soft cushion. After sitting for a short while, Shin Yu couldn't stand it anymore. He stood up with the note he had just written. Your Majesty, let's agree on 3 points. Shang Junlin took the note from Shin Yu and was silent after reading it. It was a bit difficult for a person who had just experienced sex to abstain from sex. With you in my arms, it's hard for me not to be moved. Shin Yu narrowed his eyes. Your Majesty can go back to your own palace or stay in the small study. Chapter 126. Shang Junlin didn't want to choose either of them. It wasn't easy for him to get her. He didn't want to be separated from her for even a moment, let alone at night. He was already used to hugging his soft and fragrant lover to sleep. Now that the two of them had a physical relationship, he only wanted to stick to her even more. I don't want to move away, and I don't want to sleep in the small study room. You and I are husband and husband, so we should sleep together. Shang Junlin wouldn't leave no matter what. Shin Yu wasn't surprised by this result. He raised his eyebrows. If you want to stay, it's possible. But can your Majesty guarantee that you will do what I wrote? Shang Junlin stepped forward and picked him up under the young man's stunned gaze. It's late, I'll take you to rest. He avoided answering Shin Yu's question. Shin Yu subconsciously grabbed the man's clothes when his body was suddenly suspended in the air. He leaned on the man's shoulder and didn't intend to easily change the topic. Your Majesty hasn't answered my question yet. Shang Junlin lowered his head and met Shin Yu's teasing gaze. He carried Shin Yu and walked out, discussing while walking. Doesn't you think that 10 days is too long? I don't think so. If it wasn't for your Majesty, I think 1 month is quite good. Shin Yu shook his head. Eunuch Mang and the palace servants followed behind the two from a distance, so they couldn't hear their conversation clearly. I want to be closer to you. Doesn't you want to be closer to me? Shang Junlin didn't want to give up so easily. I did my homework in advance. A youth should be very comfortable. Shin Yu didn't deny this point. It was comfortable, but it was also really tiring. Especially the next day, his legs almost didn't belong to him, and it was difficult for him to get out of bed. Has your Majesty found someone to test it? Shin Yu narrowed his eyes slightly. The tone of this sentence seemed normal, but Shang Junlin could hear the coldness in it. He didn't stop walking, but there was a smile in his voice. Shin spends all day with you. Shouldn't you be very clear about whether or not I've tried it on someone? There are times when we are not together. Shin Yu snorted. That's for the morning court or discussions with the ministers in the imperial study. I also want to bring a Yu there. If a Yu is worried, why don't you follow me around all the time? Shang Junlin felt that this was a good suggestion and wished that Shin Yu would agree immediately. No, I believe in your Majesty. Shin Yu didn't even want to think about it and refused. His words were more of a joke, and he didn't really suspect Shang Junlin. I won't find someone else to test it on. Other than you, I won't do this kind of thing with anyone else. Shang Junlin lowered his head and kissed Shin Yu. A Yu can only do it with me. As for a Yu's curiosity. Shang Junlin lowered his voice and whispered a few words in Shin Yu's ear. He successfully saw the youth's earlobes turn red. I know. Your Majesty, you don't need to say any more. Shin Yu repeatedly interrupted him, and his face became hotter and hotter. Shang Junlin stopped as Shin Yu wished. After a moment, he continued, everything needs to be practiced diligently. The more skilled you are, the easier it will be to do it. You should also practice more with me. In the future, you won't be so unbearable. Shin Yu couldn't believe that these words were said by Shang Junlin in a deadpan manner. Feeling Shin Yu's incredulous gaze, Shang Junlin's lips curled up. You said, isn't that right? Your Majesty is really. His understanding was refreshed once again. The small study room was not far from the bedchamber. It didn't take long for them to arrive. The palace maids gently opened the door. Shang Junlin carried Xinyu and walked in. "You don't need to follow me." Eunuch Meng stopped and stood guard outside the door with the palace maids. Shang Junlin put the youth on the bed and bent down. 10 days is too long. Do you have the heart to make me endure for so long? Shang Junlin was addicted to the taste. If it wasn't for cough, he wouldn't have refused to be separated from her for an entire night and even angered her in the morning. Xinyu was held under the man's body. When she raised her eyes, she could see the man's handsome face and his eyes that only had her in them. Shang Junlin's eyes were the standard red phoenix eyes. His eyes were long and narrow, and his dark pupils were bottomless. It was like an abyss that chose people to devour. Xinyu tilted her head. Her heart was shaken for a moment. Stop. Xinyu put her finger on Shang Junlin's lips. "We can talk about the future. This time, it will take at least 10 days. If your majesty says one more word, it will be one more day." Shang Junlin didn't dare to continue. "Okay, I'm going to sleep." Xinyu glanced at Shang Junlin's body. "Your majesty, please take care of yourself. If there is a next time, your majesty can go to the small study room by yourself." Shang Junlin made a fuss in the morning. Naturally, he didn't dare to do anything now. After washing up, he came back and took the sleeping youth into his arms. The youth spontaneously found a more comfortable position and fell into a deeper sleep. It was just that Shang Junlin had suffered. His sweetheart was in his arms, and he was sleeping without any precautions. However, he couldn't do anything. On the other hand, Xinyu had a good sleep. After resting for a few days, Xinyu's body had almost recovered. During these few days, Shang Junlin kept his promise. Except for the occasional kiss and hug, he didn't cross the line at all. Xinyu was like a frog in warm water for a few days. Later, Shang Junlin occasionally crossed the line and did something. As long as it wasn't too excessive, Xinyu let him do whatever he wanted. After a sticky kiss, under Xinyu's angry gaze, Shang Junlin took his hand out of her lapel. A trace of regret flashed in his eyes. After tidying up his lapel, Shang Junlin took the initiative to talk about Subei to divert Xinyu's attention. Fang Jun has already met with Sun Zhao. The hidden dragon guards have also found enough evidence to get rid of these people once and for all. So, official Fang is about to complete his mission. Xinyu's attention was indeed diverted. He no longer cared about what Shang Junlin had done just now. Official Fang was sent to Subei. Disaster relief was only one of his missions. More importantly, he had to find out what exactly had happened in Subei and solve it. Only a few people knew about this. Even the officials in the imperial court didn't know much about it. It should be in the next few days. "Do you have any clues about the person behind the rumors, Your Majesty?" "Yes, it's just a coincidence. That person happened to be in contact with Subei and was caught by the hidden dragon guards. Fang Jun will get rid of him as well." Subei main city. Under the cover of the hidden dragon guards, Sun Zhao disguised himself as an inconspicuous servant and sneaked out of the residence in the middle of the night. Everything was silent. Only the sound of his own footsteps could be heard. Sun Zhao walked through the alley with ease. He arrived at the entrance of an inconspicuous pub and walked in. Official Fang had been staying here for a while. Official Fang was injured and half lying on the bed. The situation was urgent. If not for the hidden dragon guards protecting him, the long sword would have pierced his heart instead of his shoulder. "Are you feeling better, official?" Sun Zhao walked in. He only knew that official Fang was injured when he came looking for him. It was obvious who the assassin was. I'm fine. How's the situation outside? Official Fong forced himself to sit up. His face was even paler. Everything is as you expected. Are you sure you don't want to rest for a few more days? Sun Zhao looked worried. I'm fine. This matter can't be delayed. It's not easy to have such a good opportunity. I can't delay it. The spy in the Subei army has been caught. Fortunately, we found out in time. They didn't have deep roots. It was fortunate that there were no major problems within the Subei army. If there were problems within the Subei army, this matter would be very troublesome. While Fong Jun was taking action, the hidden dragon guards had also infiltrated the Subei army. They tracked down the remaining spies through one of the Subei army spies. Fong Jun then contacted the higher-ups of the Subei army and secretly captured the spies. The interrogation was also handed over to the Subei army. After the interrogation, the Subei army reported the information to Fong Jun. Then, through the hidden dragon guards, Fong Jun targeted a few of the officials. It was also at this time that Fong Jun was attacked. The assassin wanted to kill Fong Jun but was stopped by the hidden dragon guards who were secretly protecting Fong Jun. Seeing that he couldn't escape, he killed himself and didn't leave any clues. Fong Jun had been assassinated more than once. He knew that the officials in the Subei army had probably sensed something and didn't want him to leave the Subei army alive. So, they took advantage of this assassination to hide in the dark. The hidden dragon guards had been hiding in the dark. After entering the Subei army, they didn't appear in the outside world. The officials in the Subei army didn't realize that the emperor's spies and claws had already infiltrated the Subei army. They were still feeling smug, thinking that they had solved a big problem. The official sent by the imperial court, Fong Jun, hasn't appeared in a long time, an official asked at the banquet. Isn't it normal for someone to disappear after doing something they shouldn't have? Another person answered with a wine cup in his hand. Everyone sitting there was dressed in brocade clothes. The dishes on the table were not inferior to palace banquets. There were fine wine and delicacies, and dancers to liven things up. It was a joyous occasion. This was a banquet that only the upper echelons of the Subei army had the right to enjoy. Being able to participate was equivalent to being treated as one's own. After so many years of development, the Subei army had long become a place where the emperor was far away. If one wanted to climb up the ranks and obtain a higher official position, the only way was to join them. As for the officials sent by the imperial court, they either colluded with them or met with accidents. In the Subei army, were they not the ones who had the final say in everything? These people were used to having things go smoothly and thought that everything was under their control. But they didn't know that the guillotine was already hanging over their heads. Sun Zhao sat in the second row. All these years, he had kept a low profile and didn't have any big conflicts with these local officials. He held his wine cup and lowered his eyes to take a sip. He didn't need to look to know who was sitting there. It's all thanks to Lord Sun that we were able to solve such a big problem this time. Come, let this official toast to you. Sun Zhao raised his wine cup and raised it. It's my duty. In order to infiltrate their inner circle, Sun Zhao had done many things against his will over the years. In the last assassination attempt on Fong Jun, he had also participated in it. But before the incident, he had told Fong Jun through the hidden dragon guard. Fong Jun had asked the other party to tell him 4 words, beat them at their own game. That was why Fong Jun was seriously injured. And under his deliberate actions, these people all thought that the assassination attempt was a success. Thus, there was this celebratory banquet and the perfect opportunity to catch all of them in one fell swoop. Toasts were exchanged, songs and dances were sung, and the strong wine was spicy. Just by looking at this place, who would have thought that the Subei army was experiencing a natural disaster? Actually, the most unexpected thing was that Lord Sun would help us. If we didn't have a clear understanding of the movements in the capital, we wouldn't have known that Fong Jun had such a motive, said the person sitting at the head of the table. Are you all talking about this official? A slightly amused voice sounded, and the hall immediately fell silent. Chapter 127. The voices stopped. The officials in the hall looked in the direction of the voice, their faces filled with disbelief. A man in a dark red official's robe leisurely strolled in. Every step he took was like walking on the tip of their hearts. Wasn't it said that Fong Jun was dead? Then what had appeared in front of them today? A person or a ghost? Just what had happened? Questions popped up in their minds, but no one answered them. Some people even cautiously looked down. When they saw Fong Jun's shadow, they breathed a sigh of relief. It was better to be a person than a ghost. You all don't seem to welcome this official. Fong Jun restrained the smile on his face. He didn't show any anger. How could that be? The first official to react forced a smile. We just didn't expect Lord Fong to suddenly come. That's right. Fong Jun nodded in agreement, but his next words made everyone's heart sink. How could a dead person suddenly appear at your celebration banquet? Lord Fong, what are you saying? How could we? Fong Jun waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to say more. He walked in like he was strolling through his own garden. You all are living very comfortably here. If this official hadn't come all the way here and truly felt that Subei was suffering from a drought, I would have suspected that someone deliberately leaked the news. Could it be that the imperial court didn't receive news of the drought in Subei because none of the officials felt that there was a natural disaster in Subei? With each sentence that Lord Fong spoke, the faces of the people present grew uglier. They were all from Subei, so how could they not be aware of the situation there? They were just hoping for a fluke and wanted to stall for time so that the news wouldn't reach the imperial court. They had already delayed for so long, so they didn't care if they delayed for a few more days. In any case, they weren't the ones who were starving. Fong Jun didn't need to ask to know what they were thinking. He also didn't intend to argue with them. They had done something they shouldn't have done, and how much damage they had caused. Every debt would be settled by the imperial court. Food can be eaten carelessly, but words can't be spoken carelessly. Does Lord Fong know what you're saying? The person sitting at the head of the table stood up, displeased. There was a faint sense of unease in his heart, but he couldn't show it. Moreover, he had spies all over Subei. If something really was going to happen, he shouldn't have not heard the slightest bit of it. At this moment, he subconsciously ignored Fong Jun's sudden appearance. He didn't get the news in advance. Lord Ho, are you angry because your thoughts have been exposed? I didn't understand it before, but I do now. If this is what we see every day, it's no wonder we can't see that the outside world is already filled with starving people. Don't you think so, Lord Ho? Lord Fong stood below and looked straight at Lord Ho. There was a fire in his eyes. It was anger. Although Fong Jun did not show it on his face, he was really angry at the moment, especially after seeing this scene. Even His Majesty, who was most qualified to enjoy these luxurious pleasures, had not done so. How dare these people? As if burned by the fiery light in Fong Jun's eyes, Lord Ho averted his gaze, not daring to meet it. Lord Fong must be joking. This official lives in Subei, so how could I turn a blind eye to the disaster in Subei? Today's banquet was only held because I saw that the situation in Subei had improved. I wanted to let my tense subordinates relax a little. Is that so? Lord Fong suddenly smiled. Is it really not to get rid of this official, this rock in the way? Lord Ho didn't expect Fong Jun to be so direct. His expression changed again and again. He looked towards the corner of the hall and made a gesture with his hand hanging by his side. No matter how Fang Jun escaped, since he dared to come here alone, he shouldn't blame him for using his own blood to liven things up. But Lord Ho waited for a long time. The hall was still quiet. The singing and dancing had stopped long ago, and the people he had arranged didn't move either. What was going on? Lord Ho panicked. He walked over to Fang Jun and asked sternly, "What did you do?" At this moment, his nerves that had been numbed by alcohol finally recovered some of their sobriety. He thought of more things that didn't seem right. For example, he had arranged for people to wait outside. Why didn't Fang Jun notify him when he came in? For example, Fang Jun was clearly a dead person. How could he appear here so openly? Before this, he hadn't heard any news at all. Shouldn't this official be asking you this? Fang Jun's face was cold. Lord Ho, what did you do? Did His Majesty give Su Bei to you to let you watch the people starve to death? So you didn't die. Lord Ho laughed heartily. But what can you do by coming here alone? Being scolded won't hurt me at all. On the other hand, Lord Fang, you've walked right into my trap. I'd like to see how you're going to escape this time. Come, this person is pretending to be an official of the imperial court. Arrest him. Lord Ho tried to sound fierce. There's no need to struggle, Lord Ho. Sun Zhao straightened his clothes and stood up. Lord Ho, there's no need to deceive yourself. No matter how you shout, the people you arranged to protect you won't appear. You also lied to this official. Lord Ho's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. This official thinks that I've treated you well. Why did you do this? That's right, my lord has treated me well, but I'm first and foremost a citizen of the Great Wan Kingdom, and second, I'm your subordinate. Oh, that's not right, I'm an official of the Great Wan Kingdom. My lord should wake up, Su Bei belongs to the Great Wan Kingdom, and not your personal property. This official was saying that the news of Su Bei's drought wasn't allowed to spread outside. So it was you. You were the one who reported the news to the imperial court. Sun Zhao didn't deny it. The other officials had long been confused by this scene. They looked at the three of them in confusion. This official should have known that you were left behind by that person. How could you be on the same side as Su Bei? Lord Ho muttered. Lord Ho, you're wrong. This official has always been on the same side as Su Bei. It's just that Lord Ho's heart is biased. Sun Zhao retorted mercilessly. Orderly footsteps sounded. There was a commotion outside. Sun Zhao and Fang Jun looked at each other. The Su Bei army had arrived. Fang Jun did not travel with the Northern Su army. He had arrived earlier and brought a few hidden dragon guards with him. The hidden dragon guards had quietly taken care of the people outside while he entered the main hall alone. If there were any changes, he would inform the hidden dragon guards hiding outside and ask the Northern Su army to change their plans. If the plan went according to plan, the Northern Su army would arrive within an hour. As soon as he entered the main hall, he observed the situation inside. Then, according to the plan, he informed the hidden dragon guards outside. When the Su Bei army broke into the main hall, Lord Ho's expression changed completely. When did you contact the Su Bei army? The existence of the Su Bei army had always been a thorn in Lord Ho's heart. If such a powerful force could be used by him, no one would be unhappy. However, if this force couldn't be used by him, what would happen? It would be like a fishbone stuck in his throat. The existence of the Su Bei army constantly reminded him that he could never be the true master of the Su Bei army. How could he, who had long regarded the Su Bei army as his own, tolerate this? Over the years, he had spent a lot of effort to plant his own men in the Su Bei army. Until now, it was somewhat effective. Why didn't he inform the imperial court about the drought in the Subei army? He just wanted to buy time and use this opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of the Subei army. Once the Subei army was under his command, he would naturally ask the imperial court for help. After all, it was a large sum of money and resources. How could he let go of something that was delivered to him for free? Lord Ho doesn't need to worry about this. Lord Fong nodded to the leader of the Subei army. Take them all away. These people were locked up in the government office that they had previously occupied. However, this time, they were living in a dark and damp prison. Fong Jun finished dealing with everything. Just as he was about to say something, his vision suddenly turned black and he fell forward. Lord Fong. Sun Zhao instinctively wanted to catch him, but the two of them were not close enough. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. Fortunately, the general of the Subei army, who had been discussing the matter with him, reacted quickly and caught him, preventing him from falling to the ground. Quick, call Imperial Physician Wu over. Sun Zhao ordered a servant to bring him over. He smiled wryly and cupped his hands to the general of the Subei army. Thank you, General Wei. I will have to trouble you with the following matters. Lord Fong, this is. Lord Fong was originally injured. This time, he forced himself to carry out the operation. At the time, in order to avoid being discovered by Lord Ho's men, he didn't dare to call for a doctor. He only treated him carelessly. Fortunately, Imperial Physician Wu happened to be in the main city these 2 days. It didn't take long for him to arrive at the government office. After treating Lord Fong's wound and bandaging it, Imperial Physician Wu washed his hands. Fortunately, Lord Fong's foundation is good. I will give him a prescription. He will recover in a few days. Sun Zhao, who was standing guard at the side, breathed a sigh of relief. He was also involved in the assassination plan. If something really happened to Lord Fong, he would feel uneasy. This time, the memorial was sent to Shang Junlin as quickly as possible. Along with it, the Subei army and Sun Zhao wrote a separate report. It was also at this time that Xin Yu and Shang Junlin found out that Fong Jun was injured. The memorial was sent to Shang Junlin in the form of a secret letter. The imperial court would receive the official news a little later. Without Lord Ho and the other officials interfering, the memorial to the Subei army could be sent to the imperial court. Fortunately, Your Majesty sent the hidden dragon guards to secretly protect Lord Fong. Including this time, Lord Fong has been assassinated no less than 5 times. Those people are really unwilling to give up. Xin Yu sighed. Fong Jun is a threat to them. Naturally, they won't let him go easily. The hidden dragon guards also found out many secrets. These years, the officials who died for no reason in the Subei army were more or less related to them. Shang Junlin's voice was slightly cold. Your Majesty, how do you plan to deal with these people? Are you going to bring them back or deal with them directly in the Subei army? This time, many officials were arrested and involved a lot of things. If they were to be brought back to the capital, it would be too easy for there to be unforeseen events. I don't plan to bring them back. Let them stay in the Subei army to comfort the souls of those who died because of them. That's good too. Their crimes should be announced to the entire Dahuan. What about the person who spread the rumors? Does Your Majesty know who it is? We'll know soon. The bait had been thrown. They were just waiting for the big fish to bite. When does Your Majesty plan to deal with those people in the Subei army? Xin Yu leaned on Shang Junlin and moved. You, what do you think? Shang Junlin raised his hand and touched Xin Yu's face. Your Majesty, let's set the time 10 days later. At least the first person to be executed will be on that day. In fact, at this time was a little rushed. However, Shang Junlin didn't ask much and only replied, "Okay. Your Majesty, aren't you going to ask me why I want to set the date?" Shin Yu turned around and looked at Shang Junlin with burning eyes. Chapter 128. Shang Junlin stared deeply at Shin Yu for a while, his eyes seeming as if he wanted to see into Shin Yu's heart. It was as if nothing could be hidden, as if the secrets that had been hidden for so long were about to be exposed to the light of day. Shin Yu couldn't help but feel a little nervous, his fingers slightly curling at his sides. In the end, Shang Junlin only raised his hand to stroke the hair on his temples. "Wait until Yu is willing to speak, then tell us." Shang Junlin knew better than anyone that Shin Yu hid countless secrets. Not delving into it didn't mean that he didn't care. He just didn't want to force Shin Yu to do anything. He was willing to wait for the day when Shin Yu would open his heart and tell him everything. Shin Yu gently leaned against Shang Junlin and whispered, "Actually, I can't say for sure. It might rain in 10 days. It's just a matter of time. It can happen anytime. Subei really should give the people an explanation as soon as possible." The mass imprisonment of the high-ranking officials caused quite a stir in Subei. The people were confused and gathered together to discuss the matter. What's going on? Why were Lord Ho and the others suddenly arrested? Wasn't Lord Fong sent by the imperial court to provide disaster relief? Why did he arrest the other officials? It had to be said that Lord Ho and the others had done a good job on the surface. At the very least, the people of Subei were willing to speak up for them. But in other places, the people unconditionally trusted Lord Fong. "Have you heard? The high-ranking officials of the main city have all been arrested by Lord Fong." "I heard." Sure enough, the Heavenly Tao reincarnates. They used the disaster relief funds to expand their private coffers. Sooner or later, they will pay the price. No wonder we haven't seen Lord Fong in this period of time. It turns out that he went to the main city to deal with the officials who pocketed money. I also heard a small piece of news. I don't know if it's true or not, but it said that at the beginning, there were officials who reported our situation to the imperial court. But for some reason, this report wasn't sent to the capital. We waited for a long time for the imperial court's people to arrive. It turns out that it's because someone is interfering and doesn't want the imperial court to help us. I don't understand. Doing this won't benefit Subei at all. Look at how many people have died in this period of time. If the people of the imperial court hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid there would have been even more casualties. Are you stupid? Think about it. If the imperial court doesn't send anyone over, wouldn't the ones who save us be the high-ranking officials in the main city? At that time, those people only need to say that the imperial court deliberately ignored us to incite our dissatisfaction with the imperial court. From there, we'll be grateful to the culprit who caused all this. After listening to the analysis, the others came to a sudden realization and cursed. This dog official is really inhumane. Well done. You want us to be grateful to them. Dream on. Fortunately, the lord sent by the imperial court saw through their scheme. In just a few days, the news had spread to every part of Subei. The people in the main city also understood the ins and outs of the matter from the explanations of the people sent by Lord Fong. They had always known that the drought in Subei was very serious, but the main city had relief every day, so it wasn't as if they couldn't get by. Everything in the city was stable, so their perception wasn't so clear. It was only now that the blindfolds over their eyes had been removed that they could see just how serious the situation in Subei was. It turned out that the stability they had thought of was a man-made illusion. They would secretly send the sick out of the main city and casually throw them somewhere, telling the people in the city that they were being brought to a centralized place for treatment. At the same time, they would seal the city gates, forbidding the people inside from leaving and the people outside from entering. As the news didn't spread, the people in the city never noticed that something was wrong. At the end of his speech, Sun Chao's tone was filled with uncontrollable anger. I don't know about any of this. They must have sent their trusted aides to do this. Those people who were sent out of the main city probably didn't have much luck. Not only was there no one to take care of them when they were sick, they were also left in the wilderness without medicine or food. One could easily imagine their fate. No matter what, send people to look for them. Save as many as you can, Lord Fong ordered, even though he knew that the chances of those people surviving were very small. Under Lord Fong's command, Subei's main city operated in an orderly manner. Lord Fong learned about Shin Yu's actions in the capital from the people who came from the capital. He knew that he couldn't let anyone take advantage of the loopholes and stir up conflict between the people of Subei. Thus, he sent people to blend in with the people and guide them to see the truth of the matter. Lord, what did the imperial court say? Should we detain those people back to the capital? Sun Zhao asked. There were quite a lot of people arrested this time. If they were to detain all of them back to the capital, they would have to spend a lot of effort and manpower considering the possible situations that might arise along the way. His Majesty said that we can deal with them directly in Subei. He also set a date for us to execute these people before that day. Hearing the date mentioned by Lord Fong, Sun Zhao was surprised. Why is it so rushed? Don't worry about what His Majesty thinks. Go make the arrangements. Lord Fong patted him on the shoulder. Fortunately, they had already collected all the evidence. After receiving the order, the evidence was released one by one. It was also at this time that the people of Subei's main city realized for the first time that the officials they trusted had committed countless crimes. So, my sick father wasn't actually sent for treatment, but directly thrown out of the main city? The moment he heard the news, the young man covered his face and knelt on the ground. He would never be able to forgive himself for pushing his father to his death. He wasn't the only one who was devastated. I was wondering why we weren't allowed to visit him. It turns out that it's because he's long gone. How can we visit him without him? And I was so stupid to believe it. These dog officials, I'm going to kill them. The people who were stimulated by the sudden bad news were filled with regret and hatred. After all, no one could accept the fact that they had personally pushed their loved ones to their deaths. Fong Jun and Sun Zhao watched this scene from afar. On the day of the execution, let them come and watch the execution. Call more people to stand guard. The hatred in their hearts had to be vented. The evidence of their crimes was also handed over to the imperial palace. During the morning court session, the Prime Minister announced the news from Subei one by one. Upon hearing this, the hall was instantly thrown into chaos. That batch of supplies was actually stolen by the officials of Subei. They hid it and refused to report it only because they wanted to control the Subei army. The people can't even fill their stomachs, yet they're still in the mood to drink and make merry, completely ignoring the disaster. These people are simply unworthy of being officials. Lying about taxes, oppressing the people, colluding with bandits, robbing passers-by of their wealth, intercepting and killing fleeing citizens, each and every one of these things that were placed on an official made people feel that it was ridiculous. Severe punishment, this matter must be severely punished. The minister's opinions reached a high level of unity. The actions of the officials of Subei were undoubtedly trampling on the authority of the imperial court. From the emperor to the ministers, no one could tolerate this. At the same time, the Prime Minister announced the decision to execute these people on the spot. The ministers once more began to quarrel over whether or not they should be escorted back and executed. Shang Junlin propped up his forehead with one hand, bored to death as he watched the red-faced officials argue. Suddenly, his gaze paused for a moment on an official who was pretending to be calm, but before he could be noticed, he lightly looked away. The bait had worked. In the end, neither side could convince the other, so they all turned to Shang Junlin and said, "Your Majesty, please make a decision. Let's do as Lord Fong says." Although those who felt that the officials should be escorted back to the capital were dissatisfied, they could only accept. After the court session, the officials dispersed, leaving the Prime Minister behind. "I really didn't think that those people would be so bold as to even touch something sent by the Imperial Court. They probably think that the Imperial Court is too far away to do anything about Su Bei. They didn't even think about how His Majesty would tolerate others coveting his things. After staying in Su Bei for so long, they really think that they're the master of Su Bei." With such a big incident happening in the previous dynasty, the harem had also heard the news. Shen Yu saw Mu Shi's angry expression and found it a bit funny. Still angry? Aren't these people about to receive the punishment they deserve? Mu Shi, this servant just can't stand it. Shen Yu, I didn't expect Mu Shi to be someone who abhors evil. Mu Shi, Gongzi, don't make fun of this servant. This servant really can't understand why they would do such a thing. Shen Yu, power blinds the eyes. Since they couldn't control themselves, they should have known that there would be a day when they would pay for their sins. Shen Yu had dealt with many such people in his previous life. For power and money, some people could give up everything. A mere conscience was worthless in the eyes of those people. Shang Junlin asked the Prime Minister to stay behind to discuss the follow-up of the incident in Su Bei, as well as how to deal with the person who spread the rumors. This person hid very deeply in the Imperial Court. If it wasn't for Shang Junlin's deliberate delay in the incident in Su Bei, this person might not have exposed himself. Why did Your Majesty let Fong Jun execute those people on the spot? The Prime Minister was somewhat puzzled. According to the usual practice, those people should be escorted to the capital to receive the final trial. This way, it would be more beneficial for the Imperial Court and the Imperial family to establish their power. Shang Junlin stood with his hands behind his back. When he heard the question, he turned around and said lightly, "I naturally have my reasons for doing so." After dealing with official business, Shang Junlin returned to Yuzhang Palace. Shen Yu was asking Mu Shi about the flower sent by Prince In. He thought about it and felt that this flower was a bit strange. This flower is also magical. Ever since it bloomed that day, there have been no signs of withering. After so many days, it's still blooming very well. Mu Shi had never seen a flower that could bloom for so long. What flower? Shang Junlin walked over. It's the flower sent by Prince In previously. Mu Shi said that the flower hasn't withered yet. I want to see it. This flower had been in the palace for so long and nothing had happened. There were also specialists who came to take a look at it and said that this flower was not poisonous. Shang Junlin also asked the imperial physicians to treat the palace servants who took care of the flower and confirmed that there were no problems with their bodies. If you want to see it, go ahead. Speaking of which, the date when this flower blooms is interesting. It happened to be a date that Shang Junlin had a deep memory of. If Your Majesty knows the specific time when it blooms, you might be even more surprised. Shen Yu mentioned the time. Shang Junlin silently calculated. What a coincidence. While they were talking, the two of them had already arrived at the place where the flower was placed. From afar, the flower bloomed beautifully among the other flowers and plants. When they got closer, Shen Yu did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the petals were leaning towards him. Shang Junlin also saw it. He looked at the flower and then looked at Shen Yu. There was a trace of uncertainty in his voice. This flower seems to like you very much. Chapter 129. Shen Yu had been thinking about this flower for the past few days. When he saw it today, he didn't feel anything special. It was just a beautiful flower. Hearing Shang Junlin's words, Shen Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Your Majesty, what are you talking about? It's just a flower. Halfway through his words, Shin Yu suddenly stopped because he found that the flower was swaying slightly with his movements. Shin Yu looked at Shang Junlin. Both of their eyes were full of disbelief. This flower. Shin Yu turned his head to look at the flower. The flower was swaying without any wind. The color of the petals was much lighter than when he first saw it. It was like a transparent jade. The petals were slightly curled and stretched outwards layer by layer. It was beautiful. Shang Junlin called the palace servant who was in charge of taking care of the flower. When you were taking care of the flower, did you find anything wrong with it? No, the palace servant thought for a while. No, there is one thing. This flower occasionally moves. Isn't it normal for it to be blown by the wind? Shang Junlin asked calmly. I dare not deceive you. There were several times when the flower moved, but there was no wind. The palace servant plopped down on his knees. I don't mean to blame you. Get up. Shin Yu saw that the palace servant was frightened by Shang Junlin, so he said helplessly. It seemed that the flower didn't move only because of him. Shin Yu was inexplicably relieved. Your Majesty, why do you think Prince An sent such a flower from thousands of miles away? Shin Yu couldn't figure it out. Under his hint, the other vassals sent gold, silver, and jewelry in a very simple way. Only Prince An sent such a flower from afar. I've sent people to secretly investigate King An's fief, but they didn't find a second flower like this. It said that King An obtained this flower by chance and sent it over because he thought it was pretty. He even sent it along with a big gift. Shang Junlin didn't plan to keep the flower at first. He didn't feel at ease leaving something of unknown origin with Shin Yu. However, he felt that he would regret throwing the flower away. Prince An wouldn't dare to brazenly tamper with the things he sent over, so he kept the flower. Shin Yu continued to observe the flower. The branches and leaves were green, and it was about half the height of a person. There was only one flower, and it was surrounded by the branches and leaves like stars surrounding the moon. It seemed to be emitting a lustrous light. This flower can't really glow at night, right? Shin Yu couldn't help but think. Everything was covered by the curtain of night. It was as if this flower was the only source of light left between heaven and earth. It attracted creatures like moths to a flame. The petals unfolded to the extreme, revealing the white bead that was wrapped inside. What was that? Shin Yu couldn't help but get closer. He wanted to take a closer look, but he was suddenly pulled back to reality by a voice that rang in his ears. You. Shin Yu turned around. There was still confusion in his eyes. What? His hand was grabbed by the man. Shang Junlin stared at him. You wanted to pick that flower just now. After he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Shin Yu to respond. He held him tightly in his arms and took a step back. The way he looked at the flower became unfriendly. Wrapped in the man's biting cold breath, Shin Yu's muddled thoughts finally returned to normal. When he looked at the flower again, his eyes were filled with emotions. It was too strange. It seemed like he was the only one affected. Shin Yu suppressed the various thoughts in his mind. He patted Shang Junlin to comfort him. I'm fine. I misjudged it just now. Shang Junlin was still worried. He carefully checked Shin Yu's body. He was no longer curious about the flower. He carried him out. Eunuch Meng saw Shang Junlin carrying Shin Yu out. He hurriedly greeted him. Your Majesty, summon Imperial Physician Gu. Shang Junlin didn't stop walking. He carried Shin Yu to the bedchamber. Eunuch Meng didn't dare to delay. He trotted to summon Imperial Physician Gu. Shin Yu carefully felt his body. He leaned against Shang Junlin's chest. I'm really fine. The flower didn't cause him any discomfort. Imperial physician Gu was drying the medicine. He was called to Yuzhang Palace by eunuch Mang. He thought something serious had happened. After entering, he saw that Shen Yu's face was normal. On the contrary, Shang Junlin's face didn't look good. After Imperial physician Gu finished checking Shen Yu's pulse, he put down his hand. Something flashed in his mind, but it disappeared before he could catch it. Imperial physician Gu asked Shen Yu a few more questions. Shen Yu answered them one by one. Imperial physician Gu pondered, I want to take a look at the flower first. Shang Junlin ordered the palace servants to bring Imperial physician Gu over. Not long after, Imperial physician Gu came back. Your Majesty, don't worry. There's nothing wrong with your body. I went to take a look at the flower. It won't cause any harm to the human body. Although Imperial physician Gu guaranteed that there was no problem, Shang Junlin was still scared. For the next few days, he had to keep an eye on Shen Yu at all times. He also didn't allow Shen Yu to see the flower again. However, Shen Yu really wanted to see it again. He later asked around. Other than him, no one else who came into contact with the flower showed any abnormal behavior. He wanted to know if what happened that day was inevitable or just a coincidence. Of course, after that day, Shang Junlin was very angry. He ordered people to clean up the place where the flower was placed. In fact, he also knew that it wasn't necessarily a problem with the flower. It was possible that someone did something to the place where the flower was placed. Wasn't Shen Yu plotted against on the day he entered the palace? Needless to say, they really did find something. It's a hallucinogenic drug. The dosage is very small. Imperial physician Gu took the small piece of wood and put it under his nose to smell it. Such a small dosage won't have any effect on the human body. Just by smelling it, it will be quickly metabolized. No wonder we didn't find anything wrong with your body that day. Shang Junlin exuded a cold aura. The small piece of wood was found on the flower rack. It was obvious that someone deliberately put it there. Shang Junlin strictly guarded it, but he didn't expect that someone would still tamper with it. He ordered people to bring the flower rack over. Shang Junlin said coldly, Imperial physician Gu, see if there's anything else here. Imperial physician Gu walked around the flower rack and shook his head, replying to Your Majesty, there's nothing else. Shen Yu walked over with a veil. The veil was soaked with medicine, which was specially made by Imperial physician Gu. Shen Yu's body was weaker than ordinary people. Many medicines that were not important to ordinary people could affect him. Shen Yu was also interested in the things that caused hallucinations. He wanted to take a look, so he thought of this method. The veil was not transparent, only revealing a pair of clear eyes. Shen Yu's eyes were very beautiful. The corners of his eyes were slightly raised. When he wasn't smiling, he gave people a feeling that he was smiling. Especially when half of his face was covered, the charm of his eyes was even more prominent. How was this piece of wood found? Shen Yu lowered his head and looked at the piece of wood that was placed on the small table. It was about 2 fingers wide and the color of the flower rack was the same as the color of the flower rack. It was inlaid on the inside so it couldn't be found. This was an accident. When he saw Shen Yu, Shang Junlin's cold aura immediately disappeared. There was a little palace maid who was careless. When she was moving flowers, she accidentally knocked down the rack. This piece of wood fell out and was found by the palace maid in charge. The palace maid knew that the emperor was investigating, so she didn't dare to hide anything. When she found the piece of wood, she immediately reported it. What happened next was what Shen Yu saw. The flowers and plants were all moved to other places. Shen Yu walked around, but he didn't see the flower that Prince An sent. He walked to Shang Junlin and poked his arm. Your Majesty, where's the flower? I put it somewhere else. Don't worry, I won't throw it away. Knowing that Shin Yu's abnormality that day had nothing to do with the flower, Shang Junlin's hostility towards the flower was not so big. Who put this piece of wood in here? It's a clever idea. We're still investigating. Shang Junlin took advantage of the situation and put his arm around Shin Yu's waist and pulled him away. You, don't get too close. The position of the piece of wood was next to the flower that Prince An sent. No wonder Shin Yu was affected when he was near the flower. What does this person want to do? Let the Emperor mistakenly think that Prince An harmed me. When we catch the person, we'll know what they want to do. Shang Junlin's tone was gentle, but his eyes were cold. Shin Yu and Shang Junlin stayed here for a while. Eunuch Meng came in and said that a minister was looking for Shang Junlin. Shin Yu left with him. The person who entered the palace was the Prime Minister, and it was for the matter of Su Bei. The upper-level officials of Su Bei were arrested, leaving a large number of vacancies. These positions were temporarily filled by people sent by the imperial court, but this was not a long-term plan. They had to arrange for suitable officials as soon as possible. Not all of the local officials were in cahoots. This was especially true for the smaller cities around. There were quite a few responsible officials. Lord Fong selected some of them and transferred them to the main city to take up positions. There were also some minor officials who were already serving in the main city. Based on their strength, Fong Jun kept some of them and sent the rest to the smaller cities to temper themselves. The officials from the imperial court who had come with him to provide disaster relief were also called to the main city by him to temporarily take over some of their duties. Lord Ho and the others had operated in Su Bei for many years and had a deep foundation. Although they had now been captured, the network of connections they had left behind could not be cut off overnight. In order to clean up the mess, Fong Darren was very busy. Time passed quickly, and soon it was the day of the execution. The sky in Su Bei was still clear, and there was no sign of rain. Early in the morning, the common people who learned that Lord Ho and the others were about to be executed rushed to the execution site. Those who had passed away would not return, but they could at least see the culprits receive their due punishment. The criminals were escorted to the execution site. In the face of the bloody scene that was about to happen, not a single one of the common people showed any fear. There was excitement in their eyes, a desire to get rid of them as soon as possible, pleasure, and hatred, but there was no fear. Fong Darren sat on the main seat while Sun Zhao sat below. Sensing the angry glares from the execution site, he smiled and looked back. The time has come. The sharp blade was raised high and brought down. It was as if all the sins had been cut off. The smell of blood filled the air as a sacrifice to the souls of those who had died unjustly. Rumble, when the last person was executed, a large dark cloud drifted over and covered the scorching sun. The people watching the execution looked up in a daze, cold drops of water falling on their faces. It was raining. Right after these evil officials were executed, it was raining. The common people knelt in the direction of the imperial city and shouted, "Long live His Majesty." Even Fong Jun, who was used to seeing big scenes, was at a loss for a moment when he personally experienced this moment. No one would have thought that the rain that Su Bei had been looking forward to for so long would fall at this moment and at such a time. When the news reached the imperial court, everyone was shocked. "Ah, you!" As soon as Shang Junlin walked in, he pulled the young man into his arms. "Sometimes, I wonder if Ah Yu is an immortal sent by the heavens and will return to the heavens after completing the mission. Or, a Yu is a fairy among flowers. That flower will only show affection to a Yu, and a Yu can control the rain." As Shang Junlin spoke, he impatiently planted kisses on Shin Yu's face, as if he wanted to use this method to confirm Shin Yu's existence. Shin Yu worriedly touched Shang Junlin's forehead. What happened to His Majesty? Why did he start talking nonsense? Chapter 130. The kiss on his face was intimate and hurried. Shin Yu could feel the strong uneasiness coming from Shang Junlin. It was the first time he personally experienced such a big emotional fluctuation from Shang Junlin. "I'm not sick." Shang Junlin's lips were pressed against Shin Yu's forehead. His breath sprayed onto Shin Yu's skin. He grabbed Shin Yu's hand and placed it in his palm. "I'm not sick. Why did your Majesty suddenly say such a thing? I'm just an ordinary person. How could I be the immortal that your Majesty mentioned?" However, Shang Junlin couldn't listen to him now. He was trapped in his own conjecture. The more he thought about it, the more reasonable he felt it was. If you're not an immortal, how could you know so many things? How could he know that it would rain in Subei? Which one of the things that Shin Yu took out wasn't unprecedented? Shin Yu opened his mouth and found that he couldn't explain it. The matter of his rebirth was too shocking. He hadn't thought about whether to tell Shang Junlin. This was the biggest secret buried in his heart, and also his biggest trump card. However, he soon heard the main point from Shang Junlin's words. "It's raining in Subei." The shocked expression on his face didn't seem to be fake. Shang Junlin stared at him for a while. "Shouldn't you have known about it long ago? Why would your Majesty think that I knew about it long ago? If your Majesty hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have known about it. Wasn't it you who made it rain in Subei?" As he spoke, Shang Junlin stared at Shin Yu's face, not missing a single change in his expression. "Why would your Majesty think so?" Shin Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "How could I make it rain in Subei?" The time was set by you. Shang Junlin finally regained some rationality and sat down on the couch with Shin Yu in his arms. Subei sent back news that after the execution, there was a heavy rain in Subei. The rain lasted for several days. Now, the disaster in Subei has basically been alleviated. Why does your Majesty think that the rain has something to do with me? Shin Yu raised his eyebrows. Because the time was too coincidental. It happened at the moment when the execution ended. Shang Junlin rubbed Shin Yu's fingers. When the news came back, his first reaction was that the rain had something to do with Shin Yu. Otherwise, how could he explain why Shin Yu chose such a time? At that moment, he was very glad that he didn't expose Shin Yu when he gave the order. Then, fear welled up in his heart. All kinds of mysteries were connected, and he increasingly felt that Shin Yu was a rumored immortal. "Your Majesty, the rain in Subei really has nothing to do with me. I just checked the ancient books and found that there is a heavy rain in Subei every year at this time. So, I set the time before the heavy rain in previous years. If it doesn't rain, it won't cause any loss to us. If it rains, there will be more room for manipulation later." Shin Yu didn't want Shang Junlin to continue with this dangerous idea. He knew this man. If he really believed that he was an immortal who could leave at any time, he didn't know what he would do. And this sentence wasn't a lie. It was just that he had an extra memory of his previous life and was sure that it would rain during this time of year. As for the specific time of the rain, it would be after the execution, which he didn't expect. "Your Majesty, if you don't believe me, you can read my notes." In order to calculate a relatively small range, Shin Yu had checked a lot of things about Subei during this period of time. He also copied down the time of the autumn rain and combined it with the later records of his previous life to deduce the approximate time range. Shin Yu's manuscripts were placed not far away. Shang Junlin's thoughts came back and remembered that Shin Yu had asked him for books. "You asked for so many books at that time for this? Otherwise?" Shin Yu looked at him reproachfully. "Your Majesty, shouldn't you know that I have never liked to read these? I thought you had changed your taste." When Shin Yu mentioned it, Shang Junlin remembered that for a period of time, Shin Yu had stopped reading novels and turned to books that recorded the situation of various places. Shen Yu took the notes and put them in front of Shang Junlin. Your Majesty, take a look at them yourself. After Shang Junlin finished flipping through the notes, his tightly knitted brows gradually relaxed. At that time, I thought your Majesty would ask. Shen Yu saw that Shang Junlin was no longer tense, and the stone in his heart was slightly lifted. He complained half-jokingly, if your Majesty had asked at that time, I could have asked for a reward. What does you want? It's not too late to say it now. When the matter in Subei is over, your Majesty, accompany me to the farmstead to stay for a few days. Every year at this time, I will stay for a few days. Shang Junlin was feeling guilty, so naturally, he would do whatever Shen Yu said. Yu has worked hard. Shang Junlin hugged her again, but I'm afraid that I can't make public the role that Yu played in this matter. This matter was too mysterious. If it was spread out, Shen Yu would be pushed to the forefront of the storm. It was not a good thing to be the focus of everyone's attention, especially because of such a mysterious matter. The common people feared the gods, but there were also some bold people who had thoughts that they shouldn't have. Moreover, there were still several forces hidden in the dark. They were enemies and not friends, so Shang Junlin didn't want to risk Shen Yu. Even if your Majesty didn't say it, I would have asked your Majesty to hide my existence. Moreover, I didn't do anything. Shen Yu always knew that gossip was a fearful thing. This matter could be said to be big or small. Hiding it from him was far less important than keeping it mysterious. It had to be said that this rain really came at the right time. The timing was so coincidental. If he didn't take advantage of such a good opportunity, it would be a waste of a God-given opportunity. The rain was very heavy, but no one complained. The people in Subei were almost crying with joy. There was also a kind of unreal feeling. They had waited for so long for the rain, but at this moment, it fell unexpectedly. After a long drought, there was no one who wasn't happy about this rain. Fang Jun was a very clear-headed person. After a moment of shock, he quickly realized that this was a very good opportunity to win the hearts of the people. The rain didn't stop for a day and night, but the rain became lighter. The cracked earth absorbed enough water, and the flowers and trees on the roadside also glowed with new vitality. The people, either wearing bamboo hats or straw raincoats, walked in the patter of rain. They felt the rain that didn't come easily, and also talked about the rain that they had been looking forward to for a long time. After waiting for several months, it finally rained. Yes, but do you think this rain is a reward for the court for punishing the corrupt officials? I think so. Otherwise, why didn't it rain earlier or later? Why did it rain when the heads of those corrupt officials fell to the ground? Disregarding human life, death is not to be regretted. The whole of Subei was talking about this rain, and the officials who were punished were also talked about. Originally, there were still remnants of power that wanted to stir up unrest, but after the rain, many of their subordinates ran away. To make matters worse, quite a few of them went to the government to report them, all for the sake of alleviating some of their sins. Because of this timely rain, the power that Lord Ho and the others had built up in Subei for many years was easily disintegrated. Let alone stirring up unrest, they should be thanking the heavens if they weren't arrested by the government. Fang Jun had issued a bounty, and the people of Subei had already decided that the drought was a punishment from the heavens for these corrupt officials, so they had no mercy on the remnants of power. If it weren't for them, would there have been no drought in Subei? This was what everyone thought. The news of Subei spread from the capital to all parts of the Great Huan. When the people who had been paying close attention to the disaster in Subei heard of it, it caused a great uproar. In the restaurants, tea houses, streets, and alleys, every place was talking about this matter. Have you heard? It's raining in Subei. Now we don't have to worry about Subei anymore. It rained after the corrupt officials were beheaded. Say, do you think the previous drought had something to do with these corrupt officials? Speaking of this, Do you still remember the rumor that some time ago, there was a rumor that the drought in Subei was caused by dissatisfaction with His Majesty's methods and was deliberately causing a disaster? How could we not remember? That's simply nonsense. Not to mention anything else, even if they were really dissatisfied with His Majesty's methods, why would it be the drought in Subei and not the capital? The capital is clearly closer to His Majesty. They just want to deliberately smear His Majesty's reputation. I don't know what their intentions are, but when His Majesty sent people to behead the corrupt officials, the sky immediately started raining. It can be seen that even if the heavens are dissatisfied, it's not with His Majesty, but with those dog officials. Ever since His Majesty ascended the throne, our lives have indeed been getting better and better, and we don't have to worry about the enemy troops attacking the city gates at any time. I also don't understand why there are always people smearing His Majesty's reputation, saying that His Majesty willfully slaughters the innocent, saying that His Majesty is cruel and heartless. But ever since the new year, His Majesty has punished everyone who deserved it. If you say that punishing the guilty is also willfully slaughtering the innocent, then I have nothing to say. Now that you mention it, it seems to be true. Then, did His Majesty also have other secrets when he killed the officials? At that time, who didn't cry out for imperial censorship? What happened in the end? When looking at things, you can't just look at the surface. Whether those words that slandered His Majesty in the past were true or not, it would be good if the imperial court could also give an explanation. Doesn't the government have a suggestion box? How about we ask? As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings fell silent. In the blink of an eye, the government received anonymous inquiries from the people. Those anonymous letters that could be solved by the subordinates would not be brought to the imperial court, but this matter was clearly not something they could control. They also wanted to know if there was any inside story. After thinking about it, the officials spoke of this matter during the morning court session. The officials looked at each other, mainly because there were many among them who didn't know the inside story. If there was really some inside story, then it would be fine, but if there wasn't. He Qingyu, Jiang Huiqing, Fang Jie, I leave this matter to you. Don't let me down. This subject obeys. No one thought that Shang Junlin would leave this matter to three inexperienced officials. Some people subconsciously wanted to stand up and refute, but they were pulled back by the people beside them. It was obvious that he wanted to put Jiang Huiqing and the other two in an important position. They had never been able to influence His Majesty's decisions. Didn't Your Majesty plan to send the three of them to Subei? Why did you leave this matter to them? Shen Yu was clear about Shang Junlin's plan. Official Fang would be back soon with his people, and the officials sent by the imperial court would also be leaving soon. Don't you want to know who the mastermind behind the rumors is? You will know soon. Shang Junlin did not directly answer Shen Yu's question. Does Your Majesty want to use this matter to force that person to take action? Shen Yu asked. Seeing that Shang Junlin's reputation, which he had painstakingly accumulated, was being removed one by one and in turn made him more loved and respected by the people, how could the mastermind sit still? Chapter 131. It was clear that he could not sit still. In a certain private residence, a trembling servant knelt on the ground. A pile of shattered porcelain was scattered on the ground, and a servant was bleeding. It was obvious how the wound came about. A bunch of trash. You've ruined such a good situation. The man was so angry that his entire body trembled. Only now did he realize that every step the imperial court took was aimed at him. He prided himself on being smart, but he did not even realize that he had fallen into someone else's trap. And the emperor, he had clearly disdained these things. Who was it that influenced him to bring up old scores? The man could not figure it out. No one could accept that his many years of planning had been destroyed in one day. After venting his anger, the man forced himself to calm down. "Tell me, what should we do now?" Kneeling to the side, his trusted aide trembled as he raised his head. "Sir, this matter." He wanted to say that at this point, the matter was no longer under their control. They could only think of a way to withdraw as quickly as possible and not let the fire spread to them. But when he saw the angry face of the man, he swallowed the rest of his words. Because he knew that this was not what the man wanted to hear. The emperor gave this matter to a few brats to handle. Should I say that he trusted himself too much, or that he underestimated the enemy too much? Under their careful planning, the matters of the past had already left a bad impression in the hearts of the people. Their original plan was to deepen this impression step by step until it reached a point where it could explode. Then, they would ignite it. The matter of Su Bei was the best fuse. Just as the last step of their plan was about to succeed, who knew that there would be a sudden reversal? Not only did it change the impression of the emperor in the hearts of the people, it also dug out the seeds that they had worked so hard to plant. Now, there was no one outside who did not say that the emperor was wise and heroic, wholeheartedly devoted to the people, and was a good emperor. This was the complete opposite of what they had originally imagined. After Jiang Huiqing and the other two received the decree, they were called to one side by the Prime Minister. "His Majesty has given this matter to you because he trusts you, but it is also a test. I will not participate too much in this matter. Everything depends on you." Because of this matter, Jiang Huiqing and the other two became even busier. They checked the files, understood the whole story, and announced the truth. Every step could not be wrong. Thus, a secret duel began. "Brother Qingyu, have you noticed that our progress has been hindered recently?" Jiang Huiqing asked as he flipped through the files. In the beginning, things went very smoothly. Later on, no one knew when, but someone started to obstruct them openly and secretly. It was all very insignificant things. Even if it was brought out, it would be treated as an accident. Jiang Huiqing was very sensitive to the emotions of others. He could feel that these people were doing this on purpose. "Yes, we have. We just need to do what His Majesty ordered us to do. The rest will be taken care of." Naturally, the hidden dragon guards also knew what was going on. The hidden dragon guards were Shang Junlin's eyes and ears. Their discovery was equivalent to Shang Junlin's discovery. "Your Majesty, why haven't you made your move yet? Shin Yu put down a white piece." In the pavilion, the two sat facing each other. On the chessboard, the black and white pieces fought intensely. "We have to give them some time to catch their breath so that they don't cause any more trouble." Jiang Huiqing and the other two were in the open while the hidden dragon guards were in the dark. Those people who could not sit still gave themselves away. The hidden dragon guards looked for clues and caught the tail of that person. That person won't take the risk to hurt Jiang Huiqing and the rest, right? The hidden dragon guards are following them. If they really make a move, I will not let them leave. A few days later, Jiang Huiqing felt more and more that something was wrong. He couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being spied on. He didn't know if he was the only one who had this feeling, or if the other two also felt it. He found an opportunity to ask the other two secretly. The three of them exchanged glances and confirmed that they were not hallucinating. Someone was really watching them all the time. Other than Shang Junlin's additional orders, they were still working under the Prime Minister. It was only in the Prime Minister's residence that they did not feel like they were being watched. After finishing the tasks at hand, Jiang Huiqing hesitated for a while. In the end, he still told the Prime Minister about the strange things that happened recently. After the Prime Minister heard this, he ordered someone to serve the three of them hot tea. He then said, "You are not wrong. The things that His Majesty ordered you to do have affected the interests of some people. They will not let it go. However, you do not have to worry too much. Just do your jobs well. The Prime Minister's words gave them an answer and also hinted that their safety was a problem. After confirming their suspicions, the three of them continued to work on the tasks at hand. As the investigation deepened, the past was revealed one by one. The true faces of the officials who died unjustly and thought that they were innocent were also revealed. The past that was almost buried by time was revealed to the world again in a way that was completely different from the past. The discussions about Subei gradually decreased. Instead, they were replaced by the past that was buried in time. Because of what happened in Subei, the people still trusted the imperial court. The People's Newspaper was a news channel that was directly controlled by the imperial court. The news that was published in the newspaper was recognized by the people. Once the news was published, it caused a huge uproar. I said that His Majesty would not kill innocent people. Look at the people that were killed. Which one of them was not covered in sin and deserved to be killed? I remember that after the previous Prime Minister died, there were rumors everywhere about how he cared about the country and the people. He died under the tyrant's sword because he wanted to fight for the people. After his death, the tyrant was afraid of the rumors and changed the law. But today, the imperial court is telling us that the previous Prime Minister died because he obstructed the implementation of the new law. It was because he took the wealth of the people and bought and sold official titles. Why is it completely different from what we know? This was not the only time that similar situations occurred. The people went from shock and disbelief to numbness, and then they became used to it. In the end, they even felt that it would be strange if they were not slapped in the face. It was also at this time that they realized that there was something wrong with the entire matter. Once or twice can be said to be an accident. So many times, could it be that every time is an accident? Someone said what they felt was not right. Actually, I also feel that something is not right. Think about it carefully. In the past, after His Majesty punished an official, would there be rumors that were unfavorable to His Majesty spread? Those people swore to say the so-called truth and arouse dissatisfaction in our hearts toward His Majesty. Even in the matter of Subei this time, there were people who tirelessly poured dirty water on His Majesty. Now that you mention it, I remember. Just a while ago, I went to the tea house to drink tea and heard people say that the drought in Subei was because heaven was dissatisfied with His Majesty's actions. I've heard the same thing before. Me too. The people gathered around looked at each other and found that everyone seemed to have heard this before. The strangeness became more and more obvious. After a moment of silence, someone couldn't help but say, "This is man-made, right?" If we did not know what the imperial court was doing beforehand, would we have believed those people? So, the middle-aged man swallowed. From beginning to end, there were people who deliberately aroused our dissatisfaction with His Majesty. What do they want to do? Everyone faintly had an idea, but this idea was too rebellious, so no one dared to say it out loud. Lord Feng seems to be somewhat absent-minded today. Did something happen? After court, the aristocratic family officials gathered together to discuss the matter of Subei. With so many empty official positions in Subei, it would be a lie to say that they weren't envious. They still couldn't understand His Majesty's thoughts, so they could only prepare early. It would be best if they could send more aristocratic family officials over. After chatting for a while, someone noticed that Lord Feng wasn't in the mood. In fact, it wasn't just Lord Feng. Lord Duan, who was also a cabinet minister, also wasn't in the mood. The child in my family is naughty. I'm just thinking about how to discipline him. He's already so old, but he's still causing trouble. Lord Feng sighed. The other ministers also knew about this matter. The youngest son of the Feng family had taken a fancy to a commoner girl and was dead set on marrying her as his first wife. However, this young master had long been engaged to another daughter of an aristocratic family. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but look at another minister. Seeing that his expression wasn't too good, they tactfully skipped the topic. His Majesty has placed He Qingyu and the other two in an important position. Perhaps he will transfer them to Subei. Not necessarily. If he transfers a group of Jing officials over, the empty positions will be just right for them. It seems that His Majesty is determined to promote them. The Prime Minister also has a good impression of them. He takes them by his side and teaches them step by step. How many people in the world can receive such treatment? Ever since Shen Guijun entered the palace, His Majesty has truly changed a lot. When Lord Feng and the others first proposed to let the son of Duke Shenbei enter the palace, they probably didn't think that there would be a day like this. They originally thought that sending in a son of an aristocratic family would be beneficial to the aristocratic families. Who would have thought that it would catalyze the conflict between His Majesty and the aristocratic families? He's just a sickly person. What can he accomplish? Lord Feng's mind was preoccupied and his tone wasn't very good. Speaking of which, Duke Shenbei is also interesting. He doesn't take the legitimate son seriously and instead treats the son of a concubine like a treasure. In the end, he produced an ingrate who wholeheartedly favors outsiders. The topic unconsciously deviated to another topic. Lord Duan glanced at Lord Feng, who was more anxious than usual and slightly frowned. In the palace, Shen Yu received a visiting card from Duke Shenbei. Because Shen Yu's birthday was approaching, Duke Shenbei wanted to take this opportunity to repair the father-son relationship between him and Shen Yu. Shen Yu stroked the edge of the visiting card. His eyes were obscure. From childhood to adulthood, Duke Shenbei had never celebrated his birthday for him. Now he remembered his birthday. Shang Junlin came over and took the visiting card from his hand. He glanced at it and threw it aside. A Yu's birthday, I want to hold a grand celebration. This was Shen Yu's first birthday after entering the palace. Shang Junlin didn't want to make him feel wronged. Shen Yu didn't want to hold a grand celebration. The drought in the north of Su just passed. It's not suitable to hold a grand celebration at this time. I also don't like these things. Compared to being restrained in the hall with unfamiliar people, it's better to be with your Majesty. Shang Junlin was very tempted by Shen Yu's proposal, but he also wanted to hold a grand celebration to tell the world that Shen Yu was the person in his heart. He didn't allow anyone to slander him. He wanted to be tied to Shen Yu in the hearts of the people. When someone mentioned one of them, they would definitely think of the other person. Your Majesty, don't you want to be alone with me? Seeing his hesitation, Shen Yu walked around the table to Shang Junlin's side. He raised his hand and put it on his shoulder. He leaned closer and whispered, except for your Majesty and me, there won't be a third person. Your Majesty can do a lot of things for the whole day, anything. Shang Junlin hugged Shen Yu's waist and asked in a hoarse voice. Chapter 132. Shang Junlin couldn't help but imagine the scene of being alone with Shen Yu. Shen Yu's proposal was too tempting, especially for Shang Junlin, who was still half full. Shen Yu could tell that he was tempted at a glance. She continued, if your Majesty wants to hold a banquet, you can hold it on your Majesty's birthday. As for my birthday, let's just leave it to ourselves. Yu, do you know why I want to hold a banquet for your birthday? Shang Junlin's eyes darkened. He rubbed the tender skin of Shen Yu's neck with his fingers. I want to announce to the world that Yu is mine. Before Shen Yu could answer, Shang Junlin had already given his answer. I've been tied to your Majesty for a long time. I'm your Majesty's Guijun. No one can deny this. Shen Yu tilted her head and rubbed Shang Junlin's hand. Guijun. Shang Junlin used to think that this title was very good. Now, he felt that it was missing something. Does Yu want to be the Empress? Shang Junlin's tone was calm when he asked this question. It was as if he was asking about an ordinary matter instead of an important matter like the position of the Empress. Why did your Majesty suddenly ask about this? Shen Yu was slightly surprised. I think the current situation is quite good. Shen Yu wasn't very interested in the position of the Empress. I just think that no one can sit in this position except for you. Before Shen Yu entered the palace, Shang Junlin never thought that one day, there would be someone in his life that he couldn't let go of. Seeing that Shen Yu was not interested, Shang Junlin didn't continue this topic. He just silently noted this matter in his heart and waited for the right time to announce it. Yu doesn't want to hold a big banquet. What about a small banquet? Although Shang Junlin wanted to spend time with Shen Yu, he didn't want Shen Yu to have any regrets. Your Majesty, you really don't have to think about these things. In the past, I have spent my birthdays in the manor. Why don't your Majesty accompany me this year? Having lived for 2 lifetimes, Shen Yu was really not interested in these things. Then we'll listen to Yu. There was still some time before Shen Yu's birthday. Although Shang Junlin had agreed to go to Zhuangzi with Shen Yu, he didn't completely give up on holding a birthday banquet in the palace. Whatever others had, he wouldn't miss out on Shen Yu. He couldn't participate in Shen Yu's past, but now and in the future, he wouldn't let Shen Yu have any regrets. After a heavy rain, Subei regained its vitality. Fang Jun and Sun Zhao joined forces and slowly stabilized the situation. Because of this rain, the remaining forces left behind by Lord Ho and other officials didn't manage to stir up any trouble, which saved Fang Jun a lot of trouble. With timely prevention and intervention, the drought didn't bring any more serious consequences. The epidemic that everyone was worried about also didn't happen. Before the new officials appointed by the imperial court took office, Fang Jun and the others needed to temporarily stay in Subei to deal with the follow-up matters. It was because of the efforts of Jiang Huiqing and the others that Shang Junlin's reputation among the people was greatly reversed. The stigmas that shouldn't have been placed on him were washed away one by one. The people couldn't help but start to guess who was behind all this. Shen Yu knew that part of it was done by the King of Yu. In addition, there was also a deeply hidden force that had been hovering in the capital for many years. However, this force was about to be found and dealt with by Shang Junlin. With the news announced by Jiang Huiqing and the others, the misunderstandings that the people had about Shang Junlin since he ascended the throne were gradually resolved. This was undoubtedly the situation that the people behind the scenes didn't want to see the most. They had been laying the groundwork for so long in order to arouse the dissatisfaction of the people with the current emperor. Over the years, when they really wanted to do something, this dissatisfaction would play a huge role. Your Majesty, how long do you think they can endure? Shen Yu thought that the people behind the scenes couldn't bear it anymore. He didn't expect that after so long, the outside world was still calm. They don't really dare to do anything now. Perhaps they feel that we don't have conclusive evidence and can't really do anything to them, so they want to hide and wait for this storm to pass. Shang Junlin naturally wouldn't give them a chance to do so. After all the rumors were cleared, Shang Junlin ordered people to spread the rumors among the people and let them guess who did this. At the same time, this matter was brought up during the court session. These days, we have heard some very interesting words. Tell me, who is it that has been sparing no effort to smear our deeds in the hearts of the people for so many years? In the great hall, Shang Junlin calmly sat on the dragon throne and calmly voiced the doubts in his heart. His hawk-like eyes swept across the faces of the officials. We didn't care about these false reputations in the past, but we didn't know that in the eyes of the people, we were such an emperor. We killed the innocent, disregarded human life, harmed the loyal, cruel and heartless. With every word Shang Junlin said, the breathing of the people below him became lighter. Of course, they had heard of such rumors. Some officials who didn't know the truth even believed these rumors. After the court announced the deeds of the dead officials, they were ashamed of themselves for believing the rumors so easily. We need to know who is behind this matter. Shang Junlin pointed at a few officials. We will let you handle this matter. If you can't find any useful information, you don't need to stay in this position. Official Feng, who had been silent, felt his heart jump. Coincidentally, the officials that Shang Junlin pointed at were more or less related to him. After the court session, Official Feng ignored the calls of his subordinates and hurriedly got on the carriage to return to his fu. Why is Official Feng in such a hurry today? Official Duan looked at Official Feng's back as he hurriedly left and his brows furrowed even tighter. He and Official Feng entered the cabinet almost at the same time. They had worked together for many years and he had already noticed that something was wrong with Official Feng. Everything that happened outside the hall reached the ears of Shang Junlin and Shen Yu. Shen Yu heard what happened at Shang Junlin's court session and said with a smile, "Your Majesty deliberately let those officials investigate, right?" The Prime Minister complained that they were occupying their positions and not working for a long time. Coincidentally, it's almost time for the officials to return to Jing to report on their work. We plan to keep a group of them. It was the same as admitting that he did it on purpose. Official Feng's expression at the time must have been very good. Shen Yu picked up the teacup and took a sip. When did Your Majesty discover that this matter was related to Official Feng? In reality, we had some candidates in mind from the beginning. The aristocratic families didn't support us out of sincerity. They saw that we didn't have any foundation in the court and were easy to manipulate. Later, they found that we were wrong from the beginning. We weren't easy to manipulate, so they wanted to find another way out. But at that time, we had taken back the land of Dahuan and had military power. Even if they wanted to do something, they wouldn't succeed. We didn't care about the reputation of the people in the past. It was only after a Yu's reminder that we found out that some of the conspiracies against us were set up from the beginning. More than 10 years have passed. The officials of the court have been changed again and again. There are only a few people left. The range of possibilities has narrowed down. Shen Yu pondered. That's right. There are even fewer people who have the ability to do it now. After confirming the suspects, we sent the hidden dragon guards to investigate these people. At first, we didn't find anything. It was only after the rain in Subei that we sent Jiang Huiqing and the others to clear their names that we caught the person. Official Feng knew that he had been too impatient during this period of time. Even though he used the matter of his youngest son as a cover and it was easy to find clues, he couldn't sit still and wait for death. After so many years of planning, it was exposed in one day. How could he be satisfied? When he returned to the Feng residence, he dismissed all the servants and entered the study room alone. The secret compartment was opened and he walked in. After passing through a long tunnel, he came to a small house in the suburbs of the capital. I suspect that I've been exposed. What should I do now? Official Feng stood in the empty study room and said anxiously. I'm working for you. You can't just ignore me. After a while, another person's voice came from the room. Official Feng seems to have misunderstood something. Do you still remember our deal? We helped you enter the cabinet and in exchange, you had to help us a little. Now that you've been exposed because of your own mistake, do you still want us to clean up the mess? Aren't you afraid that I'll expose you? The current emperor is not a gentle person. If he knows about your existence, what do you think he'll do? Official Feng threatened fiercely. If you're obedient, maybe we'll help you keep your bloodline on account of your many years of hard work. If you insist on telling Shang Junlin something, we can't stop you. Official Feng was shocked. He realized that the other party was not afraid of Shang Junlin finding out. Who were they? Why were they so fearless? A thin layer of cold sweat appeared on Master Feng's back. He took a step back and fell into his chair. He suddenly realized that after working for these people for so many years, he knew very little about them. he didn't even know what their identities were. You can't just ignore me. I'm a cabinet minister. Without me, who will provide you with information about the imperial court? Official Feng, why do you think that Shang Junlin will allow you to stay in the imperial court safe and sound after such a thing happened? He has long wanted to take back your position. Do you think he'll let go of such a good opportunity? Official Feng, you'd better take care of yourself. After the mysterious person left, Official Feng sat in the same place for a long time. He knew that he had been abandoned. The blankness on his face was gradually replaced by ruthlessness. He had been in a high position for many years. He was no longer the son of the first wife who was at the mercy of others. He had so many things in his hands. Could he not fight for a way out for himself? Official Feng is already in this position. Why are you still not satisfied? Entering the cabinet was already the highest position in the Great Huan dynasty. Shin Yu couldn't figure out what else Official Feng wanted. Who would complain about having too much power in their hands? Shang Junlin spread out his hands. Even I am not satisfied sometimes. There are very few people like you who is not greedy for power. Shin Yu smiled. He had also been lost in power and used everything he had to chase after it. Now, he was just tired of it. Official Feng must have realized that he has been exposed. Otherwise, he wouldn't have acted so strangely. I let him know on purpose. If he didn't know that he was in danger, how could he seek help from the person hiding behind him? Step by step, Official Feng did as he thought and went to find the person behind him. He didn't know that the person arranged by Shang Junlin was following him and was brought to the secret stronghold by him. Chapter 133. Shang Junlin's actions were indeed telling Official Feng that he knew there was something wrong with him. Otherwise, he could have done what he did in the beginning and not let anyone notice anything amiss. Unfortunately, Official Feng was already in a panic and did not notice the deliberate nature of this matter. He had the guts to do such a thing, but he did not have the guts to bear the consequences. Official Feng sat on the spot for a while and quietly returned to his residence. He immediately summoned his confidants for a meeting. His confidants knew what he had done. After all, in many situations, it was not convenient for him to appear personally. At this time, it was his confidants who appeared on his behalf. The atmosphere in the study was very tense. His Majesty sent someone who is clearly standing behind this official to investigate this matter. It is very likely that he knows that this matter is related to this official. He wants to use this opportunity to give this official a warning. Tell me, what should this official do? Lord Feng sat down on the chair, his face no longer showing the initial panic. What Official Feng said is only a guess. These things have not been through your hands. If His Majesty wants to punish you, you can push the blame to someone else. One of his confidants suggested. He was not lying. Although Official Feng had instigated this matter, he was not the one who carried it out. After all, he was a powerful official in the cabinet. He would not do these things himself. That's not appropriate. If His Majesty really knows something, wouldn't this be equivalent to admitting it? We have to think of another way. Unfortunately, after much discussion, they did not come up with a feasible method. Lord Feng was getting impatient, but he could only suppress his temper and continue listening. Among the officials named by Shang Junlin, there were a few who knew some inside information. In order to defect, they had also participated. Now that the emperor wanted to investigate, it was as if their throats were being strangled. They were in a constant state of panic. A few of them gathered in private to discuss countermeasures. What should we do now? Does Official Feng have any orders? No. Since that day, Official Feng has not received guests. I sent a few invitations, but I was not received. I'm afraid official Feng can't even protect himself now. As soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings fell into a deathly silence. It wasn't that they hadn't thought of this, it was just that they didn't want to admit it. After being in the imperial court for so many years, they had some understanding of Shang Junlin's style of doing things. This time, it was obvious that Shang Junlin was angry and wanted to investigate thoroughly. Perhaps His Majesty wants us to investigate this matter as a warning to us. Otherwise, with His Majesty's habit of using officials from humble backgrounds, it would be impossible for him to only give the task to the officials from the aristocratic families. It was precisely because they had a faint bad feeling in their hearts that they were so panicked and forced themselves to do things, personally sending themselves into the abyss. They had no choice. Everything proceeded in an orderly manner. The imperial court began to select the officials to be sent to Subei. Although Subei was remote, it was not as unpopular as other remote places. On the contrary, because of the existence of the Subei army, many people had their eyes on that place. In the past, they didn't have the opportunity, but now that the upper echelons of the northern Su dynasty had almost been completely purged, quite a few people were moved. The recent memorials are all about selecting new officials to be sent to Subei. Shang Junlin opened one of the memorials, glanced at it and put it down. Shinyu took it and looked at it. Subei is now without a leader. It's a good opportunity to perform meritorious deeds. It's not strange that they are being watched. Jin doesn't want this matter to happen again in Subei. Shang Junlin rubbed the space between his brows. Even if they can abide by their hearts now, it's inevitable that they won't change after a long time. Shinyu never had high expectations of people's hearts. Rather than placing hope on them, it's better to think of a way to cut off this possibility from the source. Zhen and the Prime Minister have discussed the method you mentioned at the beginning. It is feasible, but there are many problems to be faced. Every time an official went to a place, they needed to go through a period of time to get used to each other. After getting used to each other, they would be able to do things more smoothly. This was also the reason why many officials stayed in their local areas after being sent out. Subei's situation was more special. It was more difficult to get used to each other. If too much time was spent on getting used to each other, it would be detrimental to the development of Subei. Shinyu thought for a moment. He could roughly guess what Shang Junlin was worried about. He sat down across from him and rested his chin on his hands. Methods are always thought of by people. If Your Majesty is worried, you can stagger the rotation of officials. Zhen will discuss this with the Prime Minister again. This matter needs to be settled as soon as possible. Feng Jun should be back soon. After dealing with Feng Darren, there would be a vacant position in the cabinet. Feng Jun had made a great contribution to the disaster relief in Subei, so he could rightfully take this position. Feng Jun had been very busy recently, very busy. Subei was seriously short of manpower, but the mess left behind by those people was too much. It had to be solved. He could only promote some local officials to help with the work. Late at night, the study was brightly lit. Several stacks of documents half the height of a person were piled up. Feng Jun finished reading one and rubbed his wrist. He finally understood the Prime Minister's irritable mood. Every day, there was an endless amount of documents to deal with. No one could stand it. Did His Majesty say when he will send new officials? After holding it in for a few days, Feng Jun finally couldn't help but ask. Not far away, a masked man wrapped in black clothes sat. The man played with the empty teacup in his hand. Darren, don't worry. The imperial court is already choosing the right people. The masked man was Gu Huai. He also wanted to go back quickly. When he came, he didn't expect that he would stay in Subei for so long. Ever since he was picked up by Imperial physician Gu, he hadn't been separated from anyone for so long. There will probably be a wait. Fong Jun sighed. This is the first time I've been separated from Madam for so long. I don't know how Madam is doing in the Fu. Because he had a special mission, he couldn't communicate with the capital. Perhaps it was because it was easy to feel emotional in the middle of the night, but he unconsciously talked about the past with Madam. Gu Huai listened in silence, a strange emotion flashing through his eyes. Fong Jun, apologies, I unconsciously said so much. Gu Huai, it's fine. Darren and Madam's relationship is enviable. In the entire capital, there was almost no one who could be as affectionate as Fong Jun and his Madam for decades. Fong Jun thought about it and still sent a memorial to the imperial court, hoping that they could arrange for officials to govern Subei as soon as possible. After a few days of arguing, the first batch of officials to go to Subei was selected. They didn't have important positions in the imperial court. After going to Subei, they would have more room for development. Knowing that the imperial court had sent people over, Fong Jun sighed in relief. Darren, we found this in the residence of the sinner Ho Shi. A soldier ran in. What is it? The soldier took out the item. It was a letter. This subordinate found it in the secret room of the Ho Shi. Thinking that it must be something very important if it was placed in the secret room, I didn't dare delay and came to deliver it to Darren. After Lord Ho and the others were imprisoned, they were sentenced according to the severity of their crimes. As the mastermind, Lord Ho's sentence was the heaviest. The residence he lived in was also confiscated. Fong Jun had borrowed some men from the Northern Sioux Army to help him search the place. He wanted to see if he could find anything new. A few days had passed, but all they found were the expected ones. Fong Jun had given up hope, but he didn't expect that they would find something new. The letter had traces of being opened. Fong Jun ordered someone to open the letter. After reading the contents, his expression changed greatly. Ever since Lord Ho and the others were imprisoned, they had been searching for the whereabouts of the stolen goods. Who would have thought that so many things would disappear into thin air without a trace? Only now did Fong Jun understand why they couldn't find the goods after searching for so long. It was because those things were no longer in Subei. Fong Jun trembled with anger. He thought that Lord Ho's crimes were already too numerous to write down, but he didn't expect there to be more. Lord, are you all right? The soldier saw that Lord Fong's expression was not good and asked worriedly. I'm fine. How many more of these letters do you have? Bring them all over. No, Lord Fong put the letter back. Where did you find these letters? Bring me there. He had to find out how much the former high-ranking officials of Subei colluded with those people. This was a serious matter. Fong Jun didn't dare to delay. He immediately found the hidden dragon guards who were still in Subei and asked them to send the news directly to the palace. He didn't know if only the officials of Subei were involved in this matter, or if there were other people involved. Before he was sure, he couldn't let the news leak out. Through a special method, he passed the news to Gu Huai. Gu Huai would lead the hidden dragon guards to secretly investigate this matter. The atmosphere, which had relaxed because of the heavy rain, became tense again. The weather gradually turned cold. After half a year of recuperation, Shenyu was no longer as cold as before. Shang Junlin was worried that he would catch a cold, so he ordered people to make thicker clothes and send them over. Shenyu was growing, so the people from the clothing bureau came over to take his measurements. Shang Junlin frowned and waved away the palace servant who was close to Shenyu. He took the ruler from the servant's hand and walked over to Shenyu. Yu has grown a little taller. Shang Junlin didn't want others to touch Shenyu, so he let the palace servant guide him while he measured Shenyu himself. Shenyu looked at the palace servant who was trying to keep calm and found it funny. It's just a small matter. Your Majesty, why do you have to do it yourself? How is a Yu's matter a small matter? Shang Junlin followed the palace servant's instructions and measured Shin Yu's shoulder width and waist. He definitely couldn't let the palace servant do such intimate contact. After measuring, Shang Junlin put his hands on Shin Yu's waist and said, "You should eat more. You're still so thin." Shin Yu's waist was very thin, and it was usually wrapped in clothes. Only Shang Junlin knew how white the skin on her waist was. Every time Shang Junlin put his hands on her waist, the heat and trembling would pass through his palms to his heart, giving him a feeling of complete control. It made people indulge in it and unable to extricate themselves. The people from the clothing bureau got the measurements and didn't stay for long. "Make the clothes and send them over as soon as possible." Shang Junlin held Shin Yu and ordered. "Yes." This time, in addition to the usual clothes, there were also 2 sets of riding clothes prepared for the autumn hunt. Eunuch Meng was very perceptive and left with the rest of the palace servants. When the 2 of them were alone, they didn't like the palace servants to wait on them. "Actually, I don't need to measure. I know a U size." Shang Junlin leaned close to Shin Yu's ear and said in a low and magnetic voice, "If it weren't for the people from the clothing bureau watching, I actually wanted to touch it." The U was exposed in front of him without any defense. Shin Yu moved uncomfortably as his hot breath hit her ear. "How did your Majesty know? Did you secretly measure it?" "I know every part of a Yu's body." Shang Junlin nibbled on the young man's red earlobe. "After all, I've felt it one by one." Chapter 134. Many nights, he used his hand as a ruler to measure every part of her body. "Since your Majesty already knows, why do you want to measure it again?" Shin Yu held back the shame in her heart and asked. "Naturally, it's to get a more accurate measurement. The clothes made for you must fit her perfectly." Shang Junlin would never admit that he deliberately used this opportunity to get close to Shin Yu. It was just to know his lover's measurements more accurately. How could it be considered as playing tricks? "Your Majesty has finished measuring. Shouldn't you let go of me now?" Shin Yu raised her eyebrows and looked at him. Shang Junlin had just hugged her, so how could he let go so easily? "There's no one else in the room. Why should I let go of my Guijun?" Not only did Shang Junlin not let go, but he also hugged Shin Yu and sat down on the soft couch. "A group of people has been selected to go to Subei. He Qingyu and Jiang Huiqing will leave with this group. As for Fang Jie, Fang Jun has not returned from Subei yet. I'm not sure if I should let her go with them." Before the handover of the various matters in Subei was completed, Fang Jun had to stay. There were too many areas in Subei that needed to be rectified. Other than Fang Jun, Shang Junlin was not at ease with letting others do it. "Fang Darren will return sooner or later. Your Majesty can ask Miss Fang for her own opinion. If she wants to go, it's good for her to gain experience." Didn't the Prime Minister also say that this little girl is very methodical? Subei needs new blood. After the disaster, there are many things waiting to be done. He Qingyu, Jiang Huiqing, and Fang Jie each have their own strengths. When they go to Subei, they will be able to play a greater role. As a person who had worked with Jiang Huiqing for many years in his previous life, Shin Yu was very clear about her ability. During this time, he also learned about the other 2's style of doing things through Shang Junlin. It had to be said that letting these 3 go to Subei was the best way for them to grow up quickly. "I will ask the Prime Minister to ask her. If she is willing, she can come along." Turning around, the Prime Minister received a hint from Shang Junlin. He knew that the 3 of them would not be able to work for him all the time. However, knowing that they were about to leave, he could not help but feel a little reluctant. After finishing his business, he asked the 3 of them to stay behind. "What are your views on the matter of Subei?" This wasn't the first time the Prime Minister had asked them about Subei. From the very beginning, they had been transferred to the Prime Minister's side to work for Su Bei. Every once in a while, the Prime Minister would also ask them about Su Bei. The three of them didn't think about anything else and each gave their own opinion. Not bad. Although the three of them had set out from different angles, their goal was the same. Compared to the beginning, their ideas were more comprehensive. The Prime Minister was very satisfied with this. If I let you go to Su Bei, do you have the confidence to do what you said? Sir, what do you mean? I believe you have heard that the Imperial Court will send officials to Su Bei. This is a very good opportunity. Today, I asked you to stay behind because I wanted to hear your thoughts. Are you willing to go to Su Bei? Although this was the first time the Prime Minister had brought up this matter, the three of them were not surprised. During this period of time, the Imperial Court had been discussing it. Being in the midst of it, they could naturally feel the undercurrent surging below. This official is willing. Jiang Huiqing was the first to speak. Immediately after, He Qingyu and Fang Jie also expressed their willingness. For them, going to Su Bei was another shortcut and an unprecedented opportunity. Since you are all willing, then prepare well. The Prime Minister did not ask Fang Jie alone. He had already gotten the answer from her eyes. After interacting with her, he had personally experienced that women in the world were not inferior to men. Although Fang Jie was a woman, giving her special treatment was a kind of wrong. In the officialdom, everyone should be equal. How far they could go in the end depended on themselves. The next day, the Prime Minister handed a booklet to Shang Junlin. He was very optimistic about Jiang Huiqing and the other two, and most of his words were full of praise. After reading it, Shang Junlin handed the booklet to Xinyu. I thought he would complain. It was not easy to cultivate a few capable people, but in the blink of an eye, they were all transferred away by me. Isn't Lord Fang coming back? When Lord Fang enters the cabinet, the Prime Minister will not be as busy as he is now. Sun Zhao, Lord Sun, what does your Majesty plan to do? Xinyu finished reading the booklet and put it aside. I plan to let him take over Fang Jun's original position. He definitely can't continue to stay in Su Bei. In any case, Sun Zhao had made a great contribution in this matter in Su Bei. At the same time, he had also formed a lot of hatred with the local forces in Su Bei. No matter from which perspective, Shang Junlin could not let Sun Zhao stay there. Is there any other news from Su Bei during this period of time? Fang Jun sent a lot. Take a look at this booklet. Shang Junlin took out a booklet and handed it to Xinyu. Xinyu took it and read it. He smiled and said, Lord Fang has begun to urge you. Your Majesty should act quickly. This booklet was written very interestingly. It did not say anything about how hard it was for him. It only said from another perspective that he missed his family and tactfully reminded the Imperial Court that it was time to send someone over. The Imperial Court indeed quarreled over this matter for a few days. In the end, Shang Junlin forcefully intervened and finally decided on the final candidate. As for Jiang Huiqing and the other two, the ministers did not have much opinion. They already knew that Shang Junlin would train this year's top 3. Even if they objected, it would only make the emperor unhappy. If they had the time, it would be better to find a way to arrange for more of their own people to go over. After the morning court discussion, everything was settled. Jiang Huiqing and the other two were the most junior in this group of people, but no one saw them clearly because of this. Those who could be officials in the Imperial Court had basic discerning eyes. From various signs, it was obvious that the emperor wanted to put these 3 people in important positions. At present, these 3 people did not have any conflict of interest with the other ministers. Of course, it was best to be on good terms with them. In the end, Fang Jie was a woman, so it was inconvenient. In the following days, He Qingyu and Jiang Huiqing received a lot of invitations. I haven't been to the north yet. I don't know what Subei is like. Jiang Huiqing had only seen descriptions of Subei in books. He was very curious about this place that he was about to arrive at. It's raining in Subei, and the weather is gradually turning cold. When we get there, it should not be much different from the capital. I originally thought that after a few years, would have to work separately from Brother Qingyu. I didn't expect that His Majesty would send us to Subei together. Ever since they came to the capital for the exam, Jiang Huiqing and He Qingyu had been together. If they were suddenly separated, Jiang Huiqing would definitely not be used to it. Now that the two of them could work in the same place, Jiang Huiqing was very happy. In the future, I hope that Brother Qingyu will take care of me. He Qingyu tightened his grip on the wine cup, but his expression did not change. Even if Huiqing didn't say it, I will. I also hope that Huiqing will take care of me. Jiang Huiqing smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry, as long as I am good, I will not forget you. The officials who went to Subei were not only appointed from the capital, but also selected from the local areas. There were people from aristocratic families and poor families. Just as they were preparing to go to Subei, another urgent secret letter was sent to the imperial desk. After Shang Junlin finished reading it, he suddenly stood up. Outrageous! Summon the Prime Minister to the palace for a discussion. The palace people all knelt down and kept quiet out of fear. Shang Junlin was really angry this time. He resisted the urge to smash the things in his hands because he remembered that Xinyu had specially selected them. Since Xinyu entered the palace, eunuch Meng had almost never seen His Majesty so angry. He did not dare to delay and hurriedly took out a plate and asked his subordinates to invite the ministers into the palace. When the ministers hurried over, Xinyu also received the news that Shang Junlin was furious in the imperial study. Do you know why His Majesty is angry? Xinyu was originally loosening the soil for the flowers. When he heard the news, he stopped what he was doing and asked. The one who brought the news was eunuch Meng. It was eunuch Meng who announced it. His Majesty read the secret letter from Subei and lost his temper. He also summoned several important ministers into the palace to discuss matters. Subei, if it can make His Majesty so angry, it can't be a small matter. Xinyu whispered. The matter in Subei was almost settled. What else could make Shang Junlin so angry? Xinyu went through the matter in Subei from beginning to end and vaguely found some key points. But were those people in Subei really so bold? When Shang Junlin came back in the evening, there was no anger on his face, but it was not difficult to see that the man was in a bad mood. You, come over and let me hug you. Xinyu walked over. Who made His Majesty unhappy? The matter in Subei, I didn't expect them to be so bold. Before they did these things, didn't they know what the consequences of their actions would be? Shang Junlin hugged Xinyu in his arms and sat on the soft couch. Meng Chang, give the secret letter to His Majesty. Eunuch Meng hurriedly found the letter from Subei and handed it to Xinyu with both hands. Xinyu took the secret letter. The more he read, the tighter his brows became. What was written in the letter was undoubtedly the worst of all the situations. After knowing that the robbery of the supplies was related to the high-ranking officials in Subei, Xinyu and Shang Junlin discussed where the missing supplies were hidden. Later, when those people were imprisoned, Fang Jun also actively searched for them. Unfortunately, they found nothing. Now, it was no wonder that they could not find it. It turned out that the supplies were no longer in Subei, or even in Dahuan. After the supplies were robbed, before the imperial court reacted, they were transported from Subei to the northern desert. Then, they were taken away by the northern desert people. In exchange, they gave Lord Ho and other officials a large amount of gold, silver, and jewelry. This matter was not revealed until Fang Jun sent people to search the house and found the secret room. This batch of supplies must be recovered. Shang Junlin said his plan in a deep voice. Shen Yu agreed. This matter was related to the prestige of Dahuan, so it must not be hastily ended, but, does His Majesty want to go to war with the Northern Desert? It depends on their attitude. If they are willing to obediently return it and severely punish the offenders, I will not pursue the matter. When it came to war, Shang Junlin was never afraid of anyone. Everything he had now could be said to have come from the battlefield. The letter said that it was only a transaction with some small border officials. I don't think so. Without orders from above, the people below would not be so bold. At that time, the Northern Desert people were also involved in the robbery of the supplies, right? Shen Yu put the letter on the small table. The secret letter between Lord Ho and the Northern Desert people could not be completely trusted. I will let Gu Huai investigate. Now that there is a direction, it will not be difficult to find out anything. Shang Junlin held Shen Yu's wrist. It seems that I was too lenient. Shen Yu, His Majesty, does Lord Feng also know about this matter? As one of the cabinet ministers, if Lord Feng was also involved, this matter would be troublesome. Chapter 135. Whether he knew or not, he had to interrogate him to get the answer. Shang Junlin originally wanted to fish out the person behind official Feng, but now he had no time to think about that. He had to control official Feng first. At the same time, he sent an urgent message to Subei. Fortunately, Feng Jun was in charge of Subei and Gu Huai's hidden dragon guards were there. It was not difficult to investigate this matter. Along with Feng Jun's message, there were also all the letters that Lord Ho and the others exchanged with the Northern Desert. Shang Junlin had already read them once, and had also shown them to the Prime Minister and the others. Now, he was reading them again with Shen Yu. The earliest date of the letters was 5 years ago. At first, both sides were testing each other. Gradually, the Northern Desert gave more and more benefits, and their attitude became more and more relaxed. A year later, the two sides conspired for the first time. It was not a big deal and almost no one found out. After the first time, official Ho and the others got a lot of benefits. Later on, there were several more such benefits. They were all small things that could be easily covered up even if they were found out. They just had to help and say something, and they could get a lot of benefits. Who wouldn't be tempted? Gradually, the two sides were no longer satisfied with the small deals at the beginning. The success of the first few times gave official Ho and the others more courage, and they did more and more things. But because both sides were cautious, and almost all the senior officials in Subei were official Ho's men, and because the Dahuan people and the Northern Desert people were natural enemies, the two sides secretly conspired for many years without being found out. At first, the Northern Desert people asked official Ho and the others to do some small things. Later on, they became bolder and their ambitions were exposed. Shen Yu pinched one of the secret letters, his eyes cold. For example, in this letter, the Northern Desert people said that they would pretend to attack Subei and let the Subei army move out. Then they would pretend to be defeated and give the Subei army a big credit. The general leading the Subei army seemed to have surrendered to official Ho, but in fact, he was on the Northern Desert people's side. Of course, the plan didn't succeed this time. Coincidentally, the Northern Sioux army was undergoing internal reforms at that time. The team that was sent wasn't the original one, and the one who received the military merit wasn't the original one. After this incident, the Northern Desert stopped for a period of time. They no longer dared to have any ideas about the Northern Desert Army. The Northern Desert Army had once given them nightmares. Even after so many years, the fear in their bones had not dissipated. Are there any of their people in the Northern Jiangsu Army? When Feng Jun sent the news back, he had already informed the Northern Jiangsu Army. They will conduct an investigation. No matter how deep they hide, they will be dug out. This was what angered Shang Junlin the most. Attacking the Northern Sioux army was equivalent to attacking the Great Huan army. Shang Junlin would never allow such a thing to happen. When we took back Subei, we didn't let them ruin it like this. Shang Junlin's voice was very soft, but the meaning in his tone was not to be ignored. The next morning, Shang Junlin announced the news from Subei. Like pouring a drop of water into a pot of boiling oil, the ministers below exploded. They actually colluded with the Northern Desert. That's the Northern Desert. Have they forgotten what happened to Subei when it was in their hands? What do they want to do? Do they want to send Subei back? How dare they? The ministers quarreled. Shang Junlin sat on the throne. He seemed to be indifferent, but in fact, he was observing everyone's expression, especially Lord Feng. He had sent the hidden dragon guards to pay close attention to Lord Feng's movements. For the time being, he had not arrested him. Compared to Lord Feng, he was more concerned about the power behind Lord Feng. Yesterday, Shang Junlin was so angry that he wanted to arrest Lord Feng and hand him over to the Supreme Court for interrogation. Later, he calmed down in front of Xinyu. If Lord Feng was involved, were there other people in the court involved? Could he ensure that after Lord Feng was arrested, no one else would be left out? Acting rashly would only leave more serious hidden dangers. Looking at Lord Feng's behavior today, it seemed that he did not know the inside story. After a while, Shang Junlin raised his hand and the hall instantly quieted down. Your Majesty, is there any conclusive evidence? Treason was not a small matter. After the ministers calmed down, they began to think about the authenticity of the matter. If there was no conclusive evidence, would not have brought it up in the morning court. Since everyone is suspicious, Meng Chang, bring the evidence. Eunuch Meng jogged out. Not long after, the palace servants who were holding the evidence filed in. These were all arranged by Fang Jun and sent back. This was a serious matter. He would definitely not convict someone based on a few letters. After discovering the existence of the letters, he immediately sent people to investigate. According to the contents of the letters and other clues in the house, he found strong evidence. Lord Feng was not a reckless person. Before the matter was concluded, it was impossible for him to rashly report the matter. He had worked under Shang Junlin for many years, and Shang Junlin knew very well what kind of personality he had. That was why he was so angry when he heard the news. The ministers did not say anything when the facts were in front of them. Even if they could not figure it out or were unwilling to believe it, the facts were the facts. They would not change because of their attitude. What followed was fear and anger. If not for this natural disaster, if the hidden danger had not been discovered, what would Subei have been like all these years later? Your Majesty, please investigate this matter. This matter cannot be tolerated. Your Majesty, please, the ministers kneeled and loudly declared their position. We will have Fang Jun continue the investigation. In addition, we will send someone else to assist in the investigation. Have you chosen anyone? This matter was of great importance, so the ministers did not delay for too long and quickly decided on a candidate. One came from a humble family, while the other came from a noble family. Both served in the Court of Judicial Review and were experts at investigating cases. The atmosphere in Subei was very tense, but of course, this was only limited to those who knew the inside story. After the rain, the disaster had been alleviated and the lives of the common people had returned to normal. Lord Feng had exempted them from some policies that were detrimental to their livelihood. For the common people, everything was getting better. Fang Jun had been very busy in this period of time. He had thought that the matter had come to an end and that all he needed to do was wait for the imperial court to send someone to take over. Who would have thought that this matter would involve another major incident? I'm afraid that I won't be able to return to the capital for the time being. Lord Fong thought to himself. Sure enough, not long after his news was reported, His Majesty the Emperor's order came down. He was made an imperial envoy and given full authority to deal with the matter of the officials in Su Bei colluding with foreign enemies. Sun Zhao was also left behind to help. Compared to returning to the imperial court, this matter was clearly more important. For the sake of convenience, Shang Junlin also gave Fang Jun the authority to mobilize part of the Su Bei army. The general who had been sent to help Fang Jun was officially one of Fang Jun's subordinates. This general was the one who had accidentally replaced a chess piece planted in the northern desert and was unexpectedly promoted. Fang Jun held the imperial edict. It seems that General and I will have to work together for a period of time in the future. My lord, there's a woman outside who wants to see you. A yeoman runner walked in and cupped his hands. A woman. Are you sure she wants to see me? Lord Fong recalled that he had not interacted with any woman in this period of time. Yes, the woman looked a little flustered. She was also carrying a large package in her hands. She said that she knew something that would interest you and wanted to tell you. Bring the woman in. Not long after, the yeoman runner brought in a woman dressed in coarse hemp clothes. Lord Fong. The woman knelt down as soon as she came in. This humble girl has something important to tell you. This humble girl is Yaoji. I was once a dancer in Lord Ho's residence. Based on the woman's description, Fang Jun learned another side of the high-ranking officials in Su Bei. In addition to all kinds of treasures, Lord Ho also loved beautiful women. Every once in a while, his subordinates would send him a group of women. Most of these women could only stay in the residence for half a year. No one knew where they went after that. Yaoji had been learning to dance since she was a child in order to be chosen by a high-ranking official one day. She was outstanding in appearance and talent, so she was the most outstanding among her friends. Therefore, she was chosen to serve in Lord Ho's residence. Yaoji had been learning to dance since she was a child. After entering the residence, she quickly won Lord Ho's favor. Lord Ho showed off her excellent dancing skills everywhere. Thus, she inadvertently uncovered a shocking secret. That day, Lord Ho went to a banquet as usual and asked me to perform well at the banquet. The banquet was very strange. Everyone was wearing masks. One of them took a fancy to me, so Lord Ho asked me to serve him. Perhaps because he drank too much, that man said a lot of inexplicable words in the evening, mixed with some words that I didn't understand. As she spoke, Yaoji imitated. Later, I learned that it was the language of the northern desert. That man said that he cooperated with Lord Ho. I remembered several key words: northern desert, northern army, failed plan, and kidnapped. After that, I knew that I knew something I shouldn't know, so I found an opportunity to pretend to be ill and was sent out of the main city. Then why did you come back? Fang Jun asked calmly. Because I heard a lot about your deeds. I thought that you must be different from those people, so I wanted to give these things to you. Yaoji took out a big package in her arms. These were left by the people who served me at the banquet. The yeoman runner took the package and opened it. Inside were mostly jewelry for women, but the style was not popular in Dahuan. Yaoji took out one of the jade boxes, opened the interlayer, and took out a folded piece of paper. What I want to give to you is this. It was left by that man. Fang Jun asked someone to bring the things in and asked with a puzzled look, why did you leave these things? Because I hate the northern desert. After I knew that man was from the northern desert, I wanted to find a chance to expose this matter. Yaoji smiled bitterly. I know that I'm not powerful enough. After leaving the main city, I wanted to leave Su Bei and go all the way south to the capital. Later, I heard about your deeds from many people, so I wanted to give these things to you. From the information I learned, the northern desert people have been in Subei for a long time. Every once in a while, they would disguise themselves as people from Dahuan and appear in Subei. They are involved with the original officials of Subei. My ability is limited, so I can't find out more useful information. As she spoke, the woman's breath became more and more unstable. I'll deal with this matter seriously. He would investigate the woman's origin. As for the things she said, he would investigate in detail. Thank you, Your Excellency. After that, the woman seemed to be unable to support herself and slowly fell down. Quickly help her up and call for a doctor. Fong Jun called Sun Zhao, who was busy, and told him what happened just now. This woman's words are 80% credible. Fong Jun looked at the piece of paper the woman took out. It was a letter. It was different from the letter they found in Master Ho's house. This letter was written by Master Ho to the people of the northern desert. It matched the clues they found. So, the northern desert people are hiding in Subei and in the main city. After so many years, I didn't notice at all. Sun Zhao frowned. It seems that we were right not to announce the collusion between Master Ho and the northern desert people. Now that we're in the dark, it's easier to find them. After the woman woke up, Fong Jun asked her a few more questions. Unfortunately, the woman didn't know the location of the banquet. When we went there, we were all blindfolded and sat in an airtight carriage. We only knew that it was a big house with gorgeous decorations. After we went there, our range of activities was limited. Except for dancing at the banquet, we could only move around in a small courtyard. When we left, it was the same as when we went there. The woman told him all she knew. Fong Jun saw that he couldn't get any more information and left. Fong Jun naturally had to report such a big matter to the emperor as soon as possible. No matter whether the northern desert people had roots in Subei or not, they had to pay attention to this matter. When Shang Junlin received the news, the officials sent to Subei were already on their way. Without Jiang Huiqing and the other two to help, the prime minister was as busy as before. Because of Fong Jun's absence, he was even busier than before. When Shang Junlin talked to Shen Yu about this matter, there was a smile on his face, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. So, the northern desert people have already infiltrated Subei. Shen Yu picked up a piece of snack and fed it to Shang Junlin. In fact, it's not strange if you think about it. If they didn't enter Subei, how could they have a relationship with the former upper-level officials? Shang Junlin sucked the snack in Shen Yu's hand and Shen Yu's finger. He took a bite and let go. Yu is right. Since you've come to Subei, don't think about going back. Those who offend Dahuan must pay the price. Chapter 136. The culprit behind the incident in the palace has been found out. When Shang Junlin suddenly mentioned it, Shen Yu took a while to remember what he was talking about. Your Majesty, are you talking about the wooden block that was soaked in hallucinogenic drugs? Yes, there are not many people who can enter the greenhouse. Meng Chang ordered people to guard the greenhouse for a few days and found a few suspects. After interrogating them, we got the results yesterday. There was a special place in the palace that dealt with palace servants. When palace servants committed crimes, they would usually be sent there. The interrogation methods in the palace were crueler than those outside, and there were more ways to torture people. After those people were sent there, they were reluctant to admit anything at first. The eunuch in charge of this matter knew Shang Junlin's attitude. He would use any method to interrogate them. After a few days, those people couldn't take it anymore and confessed everything. Shang Junlin lowered his eyes. There was no need to tell Yu these things. Who did it? Shen Yu wasn't interested in how he got the answers. What's the motive of the person behind this? If he really wanted to harm me, he wouldn't have succeeded with such little means. Besides, how did he know that I would go to see the flowers sent by Princeton? Ayu's guess is right. Their real motive wasn't to harm you, but to push the blame to Princeton. They chose a small dose of hallucinogenic drugs because they would be found out before they could bring it in. As for the instigator of this matter, it was Fengpingqi. Fengpingqi, Lord Feng, I don't have any grudges with him, right? Shen Yu thought for a while. In this life, he didn't enter the officialdom, so he didn't have any dealings with Lord Feng. Were the previous incidents also related to Lord Feng? Shen Yu now knew that the two incidents were caused by someone. However, the culprit hid it very well, so they didn't have any evidence against him. The previous two incidents had nothing to do with him. Shang Junlin would have ordered the arrest of the culprit long ago if the culprit was found to be related to him. It was only this time that Shen Yu did not suffer any substantial harm, so he could barely maintain his composure. Otherwise, it would not be an exaggeration to cut the culprit into pieces. I don't think it has anything to do with him. No matter how strong the Feng family is, it's impossible for them to not give themselves away in front of Her Majesty. Shen Yu was not surprised by this result. Why did he do that? We couldn't get anything out of the palace maid. This palace maid had received Fengpingqi's favor before she entered the palace. Fengpingqi threatened her to help this time, so she had no choice but to listen. Speaking of this person, Shang Junlin's tone was very cold. No matter whether that person was willing or forced, it was an undeniable fact that he had caused harm to Shen Yu. Since he had done something wrong, he should bear the corresponding consequences. His Majesty said that there is a mysterious force behind Lord Feng. Could all these be related to this force? Shen Yu was not speaking without thinking. That force had been hiding in the dark for so long, and the hidden dragon guards had not been able to find out anything. They could definitely cut off all the clues after doing something. I have this suspicion too. Let's wait a little longer. There is already progress on the other side. Fengpingqi will not be free for a few more days. When the time comes, I will definitely give you justice. Ah, you must be worried when you're with me. Shen Yu shook his head. Shang Junlin was the target of all the conspiracies and plots. He was just an accessory. The only one who was in danger and had to be on guard against these hidden attacks was Shang Junlin. Your Majesty, you must also be careful at all times. These enemies hiding in the dark would one day be uprooted by them. I have given you a team of hidden dragon guards. If there is anything, you can let them do it. Don't let them stay too far away from you. Some of my next actions might make them desperate, Shang Junlin instructed. Your Majesty, just do whatever you want to do. You don't have to worry about me. Your Majesty, you said that those people want to push the blame on to King'an. Why King'an? Shen Yu knew very little about King'an. This person's presence was not high in his previous life. King'an used to have hopes of ascending to the throne. However, he gave up for some reason. Since then, he quietly lowered his presence in the court. When I led the army into the palace, he even helped me. The two of them discussed for a while but still could not come to a conclusion. They could only put this matter aside for the time being. Subei. Feng Jun received Shang Junlin's reply in the shortest time possible. In order to facilitate the operation, Shang Junlin gave Feng Jun partial access to the hidden dragon guards. Gu Huai also withdrew from the Subei army and began to secretly investigate the northern desert people hiding in Subei. Yaoji rested for a few days and felt better. She volunteered to help. I am one of the participants. I can help you. Yaoji was very nervous when she said this. The prejudice against women was engraved in the bones. She really wanted to help, but she was also afraid that she would be excluded because of her identity. Then you can come with us. We will have to trouble you for the rest of the work. Feng Jun's daughter was an official in the court. He naturally had no prejudice against women. Seeing this, the junior official subconsciously wanted to say that it was not appropriate. Yaoji was not only a woman, but also a dancer. It was inappropriate for her to work with them. Fong Jun glanced at them and knew what they wanted to say. He calmly interrupted them. Yaoji knows more than you and me. It will be more convenient with her help. I know what you are thinking. However, this is a critical period. Finding those people is more important than anything else. Put away what you should not think and work with peace of mind. Ashamed by Fong Jun's words, the junior officials bowed their heads and admitted their mistake. Sir, you are right. It was undeniable that Yaoji was indeed beautiful. When she revealed her true appearance, many people were stunned. Knowing that her appearance would attract a lot of attention and bring unnecessary trouble, she disguised herself for the rest of the time. Yaoji was a very meticulous person. She could get more useful clues by following the clues. With her help, things went smoothly. A few days later, the officials sent by the imperial court to Subei successfully arrived. Fong Jun led people to greet them and was surprised to see his daughter. Fong Jia was not supposed to come at this time. Shang Junlin planned to let the father and daughter reunite in the capital before sending Fong Jia to Subei. However, the plan could not keep up with the changes. Subei needed a lot of manpower. Fong Jia volunteered, so Shang Junlin simply packed the three of them and sent them over. Fong Jun's expression only changed for a moment. Other than Sun Zhao, who was familiar with him because of their work together, no one else noticed the slight change in his expression. After arranging the new officials, Fong Jun returned to his study. Sun Zhao followed him and asked, Sir, your expression was not right just now. Is there a problem with the selection of officials? No, I just saw an unexpected person. The list of officials who would be sent over was first sent to Subei. Fong Jun had a rough idea of who would come. Coincidentally, Fong Jia's name was not on the list. Sir, are you talking about those particularly young ones? It is said that His Majesty sent them over to increase their seniority. Sun Zhao had no objection to this, as long as the officials sent over could do their jobs well. His Majesty did not tell me in advance. Fong Jun face-bombed. Even if His Majesty had told him in advance, he would not have stopped it, right? In the blink of an eye, Fong Jun received a letter from the imperial court. Shang Junlin explained why Fong Jia and the other two's names were not on the list. It was because the three of them should not have come at this time. Fong Jun arranged a small banquet to welcome the officials who were going to work in Subei from afar. At the same time, it was also to let them familiarize themselves with the local officials in Subei. Fong Jia drank some wine and walked out of the hall. Subei was completely different from the capital. Only the bright moon in the night sky was the same as in the capital. Come out. Why are you following me? Fong Jia suddenly spoke after standing for a while. Sir, are you also here for Miss? Yaoji walked out from behind the pillar, her eyes flickering. As you can see. Fong Jia opened her arms generously. Sir, you are really amazing. Yaoji's eyes were full of envy. Has the imperial court allowed women to be officials now? You don't know. Fong Jia was surprised. This matter had caused quite a stir back then. Logically speaking, everyone who should know should have known. Fong Jia had heard about this woman from her colleagues. She admired such a woman. Since she had nothing else to do, she invited her to sit at the stone table in the courtyard and began to talk. Unconsciously, they talked about the most important matter at hand. In fact, when I came to find Sir Fong, I was prepared for failure. I didn't expect Sir Fong to take what I said seriously and make an exception to let me participate. My life's wish is to catch these northern desert people and find the whereabouts of the other missing women. Whatever you wish in your heart will come true. Feng Jie pondered. When the relief materials were sent to the northern desert, would some of the missing women be in the northern desert? With the addition of new officials, the pressure on Feng Jun and Sun Zhao was greatly reduced. After delegating the matters in the northern desert to the new officials, they focused most of their attention on catching the northern desert people hiding in the northern desert. Under the seemingly calm surface, there was a turbulent undercurrent. The northern desert was like this, and so was the capital. Sir Feng realized that he was being watched. He did not know when it started, but no matter what he did, there would always be a pair of eyes following him like a shadow. After enduring for a few days, Sir Feng once again contacted the mysterious force. The hidden dragon guards were waiting for this opportunity. They quietly followed him. Everything was ready. It was time to close the net. When Shang Junlin received the report from the hidden dragon guards, it was night time. Shang Junlin looked at the young man who was sleeping soundly in his arms and gently sat up. The leader of the hidden dragon guards knelt outside the room. Shang Junlin put on his clothes and walked out. "Master, we have caught the person." Shang Junlin looked behind the screen and said, "Let's talk outside." The heat source beside him disappeared. Shen Yu woke up from his deep sleep and opened his eyes in a daze. He looked around the room but could not find Shang Junlin. There was a faint sound coming from outside the room. It was dark and he could not hear it clearly. For a moment, Shen Yu felt that he was still in a dream. Not long later, Shang Junlin walked in with a cold aura. He realized that the young man was sitting on the bed in a daze. He quickly walked to the bedside and covered the young man with the blanket. "Did I wake you up?" "Where did you go, Your Majesty?" Shen Yu was still in a daze. Shang Junlin knew that the young man was not fully awake. He hugged the young man and lay down. "I went out to talk to you about something. There's nothing else. Go back to sleep." Shen Yu, who was in a semi-conscious state, was very soft. It was completely different from usual. Shang Junlin loved the way he usually behaved. He also liked the other side of him that he occasionally revealed. He looked very easy to bully.